Good morning. I will call this meeting on January 25th of the Door County Board of Supervisors to order. Our fearless leader is away, so you have the most technically challenged person in the room sitting up here, and hopefully I will manage it with these two poking at me to make me do it.
We got you covered.
All right. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Oh, is that the new software? You can look at it. Okay. So we're waiting. And Biz. And
Yep, this is it now.
just Dale.
Dale, can you sign in, please?
Issues?
Next time.
All right. We have 18 present and 3 excused.
No, hold on. We do not have 18 present because Dale's not in. All right, now we have 18.
Okay, okay. Presentation of agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda. A motion by Biz, second by Alexis. By voice vote, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. We have a special recognition, Thad and Mr. Merkel. You come forward.
Good morning. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Al Merkel, who is retiring from the Highway Department after 1 month short of 27 years. He started at the Highway in February of 1995. At that time, we owned and operated a landfill and a baler site, and that's where everyone at the Highway Department had to start. In 2000, as new people came in, he transferred into the highway shop and has been a truck driver ever since. Other than hauling aggregates and hot mix throughout all the towns and villages throughout the county, he is also the man responsible for plowing probably the hilliest section in the county. He plows the town of Sevastopol west of 42 from the city limits, and the west side of the town of Egg Harbor up to County G. Anybody who lives or travels that area knows the hills in that area. And since he started in 2000 till present, he's the only one brave enough to run all those hills. Ice storms, snowstorms, a lot of times backing up from the bottom to get material on. Yeah. Coming from the top, losing control, and you're on the dead slide all the way to the bottom. You got some dandies like Dunn Road that are really treacherous. For that aspect of his plowing, he's going to be a tough man to replace. We've got a person, thankfully now we're full staffed. We got someone who's stepping in, who's volunteering to do it. He's had a couple outings on the hills without ice, and he's been doing rather well, but I guess we'll find out. Al, we may have to call you back in an ice storm.
It's nice the phone don't ring anymore.
Al has been a great employee. He always shows up, no matter what time of the day or night you'd call him, he'd be there. He's had some health issues recently, but other than that, he's been one of our better employees, and I want to thank you for that, Al. My transition into this job and just a year ago, he's one of the guys who's made it very easy for me And I thank you and I appreciate that. So on behalf of the county and taxpayers of Door County, I'd like to present you with this plaque. Present this plaque to Alan F. Merkel. The County Board of Supervisors would like to recognize your dedication. And the citizens of Door County, thank you for 27 years of service to Door County Highway and Airport Department. So Al, congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, you get it all.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your service. Okay, correspondence? Pardon me?
Just your thing.
Okay, you see in the packet the greetings from Jindachen, China, our sister city. Okay, public comment.
Okay, so we will go through the public comment. So the way we do our public comments, we'll start first if there's any individuals in the room who would like to speak. And then we will go online. For those that are online, if you're actually dialed in through your computer or device, there's an option where you can raise your hand. When you raise your hand, I can then give you the floor. Those that are actually dialed in by phone, you can hit *9. And when you hit *9, you also will get, I'll give you an opportunity to speak. For our public comment, we try to limit those to 3 minutes. And usually our window of time is 30 minutes for the public comment. So first I'll start with anyone in the room. Is there anyone in the room who'd like to speak or make a public comment? For the second time, anyone in the room? Okay. What I will now do then is I'll go to those individuals that are online or calling in. The first individual that's in the queue is Dan Powers. I just put you into the floor. Dan, you have to unmute yourself, but you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning. My name is Dan Powers. I am a member of the leadership team of the Door County League of Women Voters, and I'm speaking to make 2 points on behalf of the League. We urge the Door County Board of Supervisors to use the almost $5.4 million from the American Rescue Plan Act to address multiple longstanding and critical needs in the county. In this case, putting all the eggs in one basket, we think, would be losing an opportunity to help many of the county residents who have more than one need or priority. This is an opportunity for the board to give serious funding help, which will address several lingering needs and issues in Door County. We urge you to consider that while this is a lot of money, it's not enough to solve any one problem, but it is enough to make significant headway along multiple fronts and in several areas. And this brings me to my second point. In September of 2020, the Door County League of Women Voters published the results of an extensive local 3-year study entitled Door County Community's Response to Mental Health and Substance Use Issues, which, by the way, is on the League's website. The study included in-depth interviews with the leaders of 14 of the county's public and private agencies and departments that touch on issues of mental health and substance use. A primary finding was, and I quote, most interviewees had a similar answer when asked what they need most. They cited the need for greater funding and human resources for support for persons with mental health and substance use issues. And it went on more specifically to add the need for transitional housing. Based on these findings, we in the League fully support and urge you to fund the Health and Human Services request for a multi-bed mental health / sober living facility. As laid out in the HHS proposal, the ongoing benefits of the facility would have multiple positive effects and may well save the county money going forward, as well as help address the growing needs of county residents who deal day in and day out with the related issues of mental health and substance use. Thank you, and we look forward to following your discussion and your support.
Thank you. The next one is a dial-in. The last two digits are 1-3. You have the floor in 3 minutes. You're currently muted. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Good morning. Thank you. Donald Fricks, 8305 Quarter Line Road. Good morning to everybody, Madam Chair. I have a comment about hearing process, and I'll try not to comment about the votes you're taking today on zoning hearings. Recusal and a request for future action from the board. I was asked during an RPC hearing before you today if I was there representing my town board. Respecting the committee, I answered the question, but that doesn't preclude my feeling that the particular questioning illustrated an inappropriate, clear, and unnecessary bias, potentially influencing that committee vote in today's RPC recommendation. Similarly, I'll ask the question, would it ever be appropriate to ask people such as Supervisor Roy Engelbort or Supervisor Robillard, who used their official titles, maybe not with their permission, to endorse Senator Jock in the 2018 election. So, I mean, similarly, would we ask them, if they agreed with Andre Jacques' current attempt to reduce gun protection in schoolyards, or reduce the age of concealed carry permit to 18, or, that doesn't mean they automatically agree with his removal of racial history from our public educational curriculum. So, there you go. So, but there we have two county supervisors use their titles to endorse a candidate who's now a state senator. Unless a new precedent is being created by asking a private citizen about their town commitment, to be an appointed member, and I certainly hope that's not happening, and I certainly hope our supervisors are never asked similar questions on county business. Environmental health and sustainability should have been the primary focus of Door County Land Conservation Committee's efforts for decades, not agricultural business profitability. Formation of a new sustainability committee clearly suggests it has not been happening at LCC. If there are any LCC committee members holding a personal financial interest in ignoring, trivializing, minimizing further environmental protection regulations, for instance, being requested of the Wisconsin DNR in the Kennard Farms pollution elimination discharge permit, such as supervisor recusal should have been offered already, or Mr. Land Conservation Chair or Mr. County Board Chair. That question should be looked at. Aside
Thank you,
from,
Don. Your time is up. Thank you.
Can I, how many people are left? May I have a follow-up for the last comment here, please?
It depends.
We have one more.
If you would do it very quickly. We have one
Okay.
more in the queue.
My request would be, HIPAA, aside from HIPAA restrictions, I don't think a county department head should be allowed to decide whether or not any future committee meetings should be recorded or not. And I think that should be a policy decision made by the county board. And lastly, I enjoyed all the work going into the door fiber net discussion, but I brought this up before that unless we are including strong efforts to change state law that prevents a publicly owned internet service provider from using public funds to compete with the private corporations who
Please
are
finish,
already publicly subsidized, I'd like to see that happen. Thank you.
Okay, Marissa Downs, you have the floor. You have to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Marissa Downs. I'm with Mosaic Ventures, the developer of the 45 units of affordable housing in Sister Bay. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm on the call. So if you have any questions, I'm available to answer any of those on the specifics of the development. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you to all that participated. Supervisor's response. Alexis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a response. I just did under correspondence, just pointing supervisors to their emails regarding some more public comment we received about the ARPA funds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else? Okay. Approval of minutes for the December 14th, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion? Okay, Roy moved and Rodney seconded. Any corrections, additions, deletions? If not, by voice vote, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, County Administrator.
Sure, we have Sue online, so I'll have Sue join us first. Sue, just give me a second. I'll share the screen.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Good morning, everybody. This is Sue Powers, Public Health Manager, Health Officer. Next slide, please. This is a timeline of daily cases of COVID in Door County residents since the beginning of the pandemic, and just want you to see the impressive high surge we're at. At the end of the graph where that yellow line comes down, that's the daily average, and the very end is incomplete data. So I sure hope it goes down like that, but it is incomplete at this point. And of course, this surge is due to the Omicron variant currently happening across the country and has put every county in the state in the critically high disease activity level. So once again, at Public Health, we've shifted priorities to be most responsive to the pandemic today and strive to use our public health resources on what will help our community the most. So we have shifted away from the goal of contacting each newly diagnosed person to more of community messaging. Last week, we averaged 90 new cases per day, and we have not had capacity to follow up by telephone with every positive case for some weeks. This is not unique to us. It's the case with other health departments as well, and the state has endorsed shifting priorities as we are doing. We send everyone who has a positive test that we're aware of on the surveillance system, either an email or a U.S. Postal Service mailing with information about isolation and close contacts, all that information. We prioritize those we reach out to by phone. So currently we're prioritizing the parents of cases who are under 18 years because of the school situations. We prioritize those who are unvaccinated and also those who reach out to call us about what to do next. And please know that the case numbers do not reflect any at-home testing. These at-home tests are not included in any data, state or local. But with the current surge causing longer testing turnaround times and difficulty with providers to keep up with the demand for testing, at-home tests are certainly an important tool. We've had a lot of questions around them, and there is a new section on our COVID webpage regarding next steps after you use an at-home test. And we're happy to walk through isolation dates or any other questions if people call us. We've had a lot of questions asking if we're giving out at-home tests or if we're giving out N95 masks. And the answer is no to both of those questions. We have not been provided either, nor at this moment anyway, do we anticipate getting either. Does the general public need to wear N95 masks? Well, the first part of the answer to that is that medical N95s are still reserved for healthcare providers. Our strong recommendation is that when in indoor public places, you wear a mask that fits well and that you can wear consistently. N95s do offer the most protection, yet they are difficult to tolerate for any length of time and must fit well to be effective. We also have a section on our webpage with more information about this. So with Omicron causing this surge, and thankfully, this is often more mild symptoms, why be concerned about these numbers? Next slide, please. This is the number of hospitalizations in Door County residents, and you can see it starts in 2020 and goes through all of 2021. The peak was in December with 30 hospitalizations. Hospitals across the state are near capacity, and COVID patients are really only a fraction of those hospitalized, but at times prevent others from getting needed or specialized care for other illnesses or injuries. Certainly, I can't speak for Door County Medical Center, but I am certainly aware that they've been extremely busy, and in recent weeks, they've had many COVID patients, sometimes comprising as much as half of their inpatient census. Next slide, please. Similar to last month, there are still many cases in children and youth. You can see that less than 18 comprises about 20% of the cases. Next slide, please. So vaccine remains a top priority for us. State data tells us that those unvaccinated are hospitalized at a rate 10 times higher than those fully vaccinated. And likewise, those unvaccinated have a COVID death rate 14 times higher. Across the state, 63% of the population has received first doses of COVID vaccine. And you can see from this slide that we're doing better than that in Door County. 77.9% have received at least one dose of vaccine. And then you can see on the bottom left, the age groups. Certainly some work to do in children and youth. We are experiencing having lower numbers of people interested in getting vaccine. We continue to offer clinics in our office, Sister Bay and Washington Island. We continue to collaborate with others in the community who provide vaccines to provide the best options for the community. And you can schedule a vaccine appointment online through our website or by calling us. And that concludes my update.
Questions or comments for Sue? Alexis?
Thank you. I made this comment at one of the earlier committee meetings, but I just wanted to reiterate. I was in a position over the last month that I needed to reach out to public health about coronavirus hitting the family, and I really appreciated the professionalism and the empathy and just all of the great work that the staff are doing when they picked up the call at 8 o'clock as they're getting ready and in. And I just really appreciated that. So I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is this Nissa? So nobody. Okay. All right. Thank you again, Sue, for all your work and your staff's work. Well done. Okay, monthly report on operational and capital projects.
Sure. So in your packet on page 9, if you took the time, the memo has been regenerated to kind of summarize most of the projects that are in queue for 2022. So there's actually quite a bit of changes that are in the document itself. And there'll still be some items that we're going to either add or drop off as they get completed. So again, if there's any questions on any of those projects, I can definitely cover those. I guess this one item I do want to cover this quickly is under the capital projects, we have the museum archives and former Yonkers listed as that project. As you're aware, this past month, we've had a whole series of meetings just trying to wrap that up. And just to give a status to the county board, what we're doing at the facilities and parks level is that we have separated the projects. And what we're looking at doing is proceeding with the museum and archives portion of the project. So right now we're looking at getting some bids for design services, and that ultimately will come to county board for approval. And then what we're doing with the library Miller art portion of the project is we're putting that on on hold, because that part of the project, they are working with a consultant on completing their space needs study. So again, we separated those two projects. One's going to start moving forward through our traditional process. One's on hold until we complete the space study. And then once that study is completed, then I'll come back to facilities and parks for more discussion. So that's just wanted to give an update to the entire county board of where we're at. And like I said, with the with the museum and archives portion, again, we're out looking for design services. That'll come back to facilities and parks for their review. And then ultimately, before we proceed with that though, it'll need county board approval. So just to give you an update on that. And with that, I'll just leave it to if there's any other questions. Otherwise, like I said, there's a whole lot of new material in there in terms of stuff that we're hoping to get done in 2022. So it'll be exciting.
Anyone have questions? Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question, Ken, and when we talk about, or when we look forward to putting bids out, design bids and such, what kind of, or do we have a sustainability metric that we're following as far as moving forward with, our new construction? Do we have a sustainability metric that we're using?
That was actually an item that was, discussed, I know, at our sustainability committee. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to do is when we look at any type of new project or even our existing building or facilities, we are, I guess, applying, I know it's a catchphrase, but we are applying the sustainability lens. So I don't think we're going to go down the path of being LEED certified in terms of the ultimate design, just because of the cost increase for that is too significant as far as the payback. But we will be looking at trying to do, obviously, the design of the building and also the systems to be very sustainable, at least try to meet many of those standards.
And is that something that's being requested from potential bidders? That they employ a sustainability lens?
That'll be part of the selection process when we do that and go through that process, yes.
Alexis had been number one. Did we bump her off? You did? Okay. All right, Morgan?
Just for clarification, I think, so the fate of the Yonkers building, is that something that's going to be worked into those design bids with the museum archives, or is that kind of split off into its own property within that phase?
It's going to be a mesh with that. So as part of the review with the architect, we're going to ask them to look at the previous design work that was done, just to ensure the cost figures that we had for a previous study are valid. But then once we know that portion, I think the focus will be on the museum itself and what we need in terms of the property. And then once we have that portion done, then yes, the Yonkers will be part of the discussion of what should we do with that moving forward, whether it should be, there's a whole range of options for the Yonkers then after that. So it could be redeveloped, it could be repurposed, it could be sold. And that'll be discussed at the committee level for that, for their initial recommendation.
Vinnie?
So just one more question on the same topic is, can you just give a quick review in clarifying that? So am I thinking right that half of the building about would be used for the archives and museum, or that's what the study is determining? But either way, you're talking about the Yonkers building. And then what's used in the sections that don't have a plan with the museum and archives is what we're waiting for the library study on?
Yep. Sure. So just for clarification, so what we're looking at is actually not even potentially using the Yonkers building at all. So the Miller, not the Miller, I keep on saying Miller, I apologize. The museum and the archives, they're looking at doing the expansion directly to the existing museum and not having to utilize the Yonkers. Again, but we're just going to ask them to do due diligence just to make sure that the cost estimates that we received from the Edinburgh-Anderson study do make that too cost prohibitive in terms of using the Yonkers building. But the proposal or the services we're looking for, the primary focus is to have the expansion on the existing museum. Then that expansion would house both museum and the archives.
Into the Yonkers property at all. It's just exclusively on the parcel the museum's on now.
But the parking goes on.
Yeah, the expansion itself would be on the existing parcels potentially right now, but they are looking at reconfiguring the lot so that way we're capturing the parking that's necessary to support the facility.
Okay. David Engelbert?
Yes, I guess I may be perhaps a lone voice in looking at the Yonkers building, but when we purchased it, I was hopeful it could be a building that we could use. Last fall at the conference, there was a presenter there on how we use and maintain our buildings, looking forward to so that they're more environmentally friendly, more appealing to the public and so forth. I did ask the individual doing that presentation after if looking at almost a box store type building the county had purchased and how it could maybe be utilized. And he then offered or said to me that his company could come up here and look at such a building at no cost to the county. I presented that thought to the facilities committee, and I guess it's gone nowhere, but I guess I'd like county board to know that apparently there was that offer. And if there's at no cost, my experience is sometimes one architect says you can do this with a building and someone else says it's different. And if it is truly at no cost, it's maybe something we should consider looking at. Thank you.
Anyone else? Did you want to comment?
No, it'll be dry.
So any other questions or comments? Okay. Then we will move on to the resolutions. The plan is to do the resolutions except for the broadband and then the ordinances. And then we'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll hear about the proposals. And then after you've had a chance to hear more about the broadband, then we will act on that resolution. So, Mr. Osted?
Yes. Before us is the annual thing for migratory birds. Day reserved and is therefore the Door County Board of Supervisors does hereby proclaim the second Saturday in May as International Migratory Bird Day in the County of Door.
Okay. We have a motion by Dan and a second by Alexis. Any questions, comments? Okay, this will be a voice vote. If nothing, all in favor say aye. Aye, opposed? Okay. Mr. Osted, again.
Okay. The next two resolutions are to authorize the Facilities and Parks Committee to give financial assistance for pay stations at Carmody Park and Schuler Dock County Park. If you want further explanation on how they work, we can ask Wayne.
Is Wayne online?
No, he's here.
Oh, he's here.
If
Okay.
necessary.
Yeah, would you like to come and explain?
So essentially, we're going to receive some grants from the DNR to upgrade our pay stations. We put pay stations in Shoedor's, Carmody, and Penny Park, and it's been greatly successful. We've reduced the amount of envelopes and cash and time in the office, but the upgrade is to print out a sticker when someone actually pays for it, so they can get that sticker right away, really. So it's an upgrade to the existing pay stations that we were able to capitalize on a grant, and then the matching funds comes from the boat reserve.
Todd?
Yeah, so when you say a sticker, so you're saying that would be like the annual?
Yes.
So what about the gentlemen that fish once or twice a year and need to pay? How do they?
Sure, so they put their $7 or they run their credit card, however they do it, they still get a printout of a piece of paper that goes in the dash, and that's what it was before, is you'd receive a printout. And if you put it in your dash for 30 days, the ink would go away, and that was on purpose, so you'd have to buy a new one if you didn't redeem it within 30 days.
And why those two facilities? Obviously, you only got 3 paid, the way it sounded, were those two?
I want to say it was something about internet connections and how that worked at Shooters. So we're having some issues with towers and things like that. And that's why the camera's offline there as well. So that's what we're.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? So let me ask to clarify what Todd's question.
Sure.
So we are upgrading Carmody and Shootwars, but not Penny. And is that because of,
Let me look at it.
That's what it
So we got,
says.
O2 is for Carmody.
03 is for Shoodwars?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. There's a reason behind it. It's either we had the funds or we couldn't get as much from the DNR. There was some stipulations with the DNR about as much as we could get.
Do we bring in Bert?
Yeah, he's on there.
Bert, can you clarify for us, please?
Yep, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so the Penny Pay Station one has been rolled into an existing grant because that one we're doing dock replacement at. So the pay station grant for that specific park was rolled into another grant.
We knew there would be a reason.
We've been highly successful and very collaborative with the state this year on a lot of grants. And sorry if I'm confusing some of them. So, and you'll see that update. I want to say it's from Ken's report. Well, actually, they might not even be in there because we added them yesterday. A lot of them that came through, a little over $100,000 in various different ways from the state. So, apologize for that.
I'm sorry. Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So then just to clarify, all three pay stations will be replaced and I'm assuming they'll all be online then this spring for the spring season, or what's our timeline, I guess?
Yes, that's the goal.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so we have a motion by Dan and a second by Alexis for the Robert Carmody County Park Pay Station. This is going to be a machine vote or a voter board vote. Right? Yep, we're ready. So we have, did we bring somebody back? Oh, Megan's not. Okay, so 18 yes and 0 no. All right, then, Dan, you wanna introduce the second one, even though we've already.
Same reasoning behind the second one as the first one, so move.
Okay, motion, any other discussion that anybody's thought of? All right, then a motion by Dan and a second by Bob for the Shoodwars dock. And this is going to be a voter board as well. But hold on, Todd?
Just one question I didn't ask. This grant, is this 100% grant or is there a county match?
Well, there's a match that we would take out of the
What is that?
the boat launch reserve.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
50%.
8,302 and 33 cents. It's 50-50.
Anyone else? Okay, then oh, David Enigal.
Classic question, what's the estimated life of the machine and replacement cost?
Oh, goodness. I would have to talk with the manufacturer. So we're using the existing machines that we've had in place for 2 years now. We bring them in, just so everyone knows, they don't stay out there all winter. We bring them in and store them inside. And that kind of helps our longevity. As far as us taking care of them, we literally wax them once a month to, keep them fresh and strong on the outside appearance, for the covering. And then it's usually upgrades through the cloud as far as the data and the electronics.
Anyone else? All right, then we can go to the voter board. And we passed 18-0. Okay, and once more, Mr. Osted.
Okay, this is a annual thing to apply for application for funds under section 23-926 Wisconsin statute for aid to counties for snowmobile purposes.
We have a motion from Dan and Roy has seconded it. Any discussion? Okay, if not, we do need to go to the voter board for this one as well. It's all right. I'm just grateful you're doing it, not me. All right, passed. 18 yes, 0 no. Thank you. Mr. Fisher.
Chair. I'll make a motion to accept resolution or pass resolution number 2022-05, approval of the Wisconsin DNR Targeted Runoff Management or TRM Program Grant Award to Soil and Water Conservation Department. It's in the amount of $220,000. And this is used to assist in water quality, targeted runoff management practices.
Aaron, did you want to add anything or see if there are questions? All right, we have a motion by Mr. Fisher and a second by Mr. Verley. Any questions on this? Okay, if not, we can go to the voter board. Okay, passed 18 to nothing. Mr. Engelbert, David, that is.
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-06. It is to hire 2 new defined term positions in the public health area because those staff people have been so busy with all the COVID issues that they're unable to do most of their regular work there. And this would give them additional help on a limited term through the end of the first year, and then again to be reviewed after that. So.
Okay, thank you. Joe, did you want to add anything or just wait to respond if people have questions? Okay, anyone have any regarding this? No? Okay, we have a motion by David Engelbert and a second by Ken Fisher. Let's go to the voter board.
Just for reference, this requires a supermajority. Again, we're taking funds that are allocated through the state.
No.
But it's unbudgeted though.
Oh.
Okay, well,
I guess we could, I was under the impression that there were more funds in the budget for this.
I think
Okay.
there are. Joe,
well,
can
the
you
funds
speak to
came
that?
into the state, and we have the funds that came into the state, but we did not physically budget this expense for these positions. So I think they'll go through either way, but I just want to make sure.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm just, because I had initially indicated it was super majority.
Okay,
It wasn't, but yeah, it may not matter depending on how the vote comes.
yep.
okay.
We trust in Grant. There we go. Sorry.
Yes, we are ready.
Oh, wait.
No, we have one more question. Vinnie?
I just can't hear back here what's being said up there. Thank you.
There was a discussion as to whether this was a super majority or just a majority because of the funds coming from the COVID funds from the state. And we're thinking it may pass in either case, but we'll find out. So, okay.
This is the option.
Okay. Passed by a vote of 18 to nothing. All right, now we will skip the broadband resolution for now and move to the Library Foundation grant. Elizabeth?
Yes. My microphone up. I'd like to make a motion to approve the Library Foundation grant to the Door County Library. This Door County Library Foundation has approved a grant award to the Door County Library in the amount of $35,000 to be used by all 8 branches. This grant supports the mission of the Door County Library to inform, instruct, inspire during difficult times and into the future. The Door County Library Board has voted to support accepting the above grant. And the Door County Board of Supervisors would hereby authorize this acceptance.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Right, it's been moved by Elizabeth and seconded by Biz. If there's no further questions, this is a machine vote as well. So. Passed by 18-0. All right, ordinances. Mr. Enigal.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to accept the amendment, the report on the amendment of zoning map of Gibraltar.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, it's been moved by David Enigal and seconded by Roy Engelbert. This is a voice vote since it's just the report, the acceptance of the report. All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed? Okay, Mr. Enigal, the ordinance.
And I'll make a motion to adopt the ordinance amendment to the zoning map of Gibraltar. If there's any questions, the department head is here to answer question.
Are there any questions? Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, I mean, I'm just trying to understand the process. Maybe Mariah could tell the difference between village center and general commercial. I mean, just looking at the map, obviously this is a change that creates an island of general commercial, but I also see on the map that the property that's sort of surrounding is already a gas station. So I'm just wondering what the difference is between those two. And then if there, is any concern, obviously it's right across the street from.
Hold on, Bob, your mic went off.
Sorry, Bob.
Did you catch that or not? I don't know.
Nope, could you repeat?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously it is right across the street from State Park, a natural area. So, but then it obviously is sort of a commercial corridor already. So I'm just curious if you could kind of clarify a little bit. And this parcel basically wraps around a gas station. So I mean, it is sort of a commercial core already. Thank you.
Morning. So the difference between the general commercial and village commercial, and those two districts only exist in Gibraltar, is very limited. There's maybe 4 to 5 uses that are allowed in general commercial that aren't allowed in village commercial, and all of them require conditional use permits. So if the proposed project for this property didn't go through and one of those other things became the intended use for the property, the Resource Planning Committee would still have a chance to review the project. The fact that it's creating an island, it wasn't really of concern to the Resource Planning Committee because the future land use map for this area shows that whole stretch as commercial. And so they didn't really think that it mattered very much which district it actually was. The district that's being requested, the general commercial, actually allows a much lower percentage of impervious surface than the existing district, which is the village commercial. So that's, I think, actually a benefit from rezoning. And the proposed project is a new twist, or at least new to me, on miniature golf. It's an environmentally friendly miniature golf course that uses no pesticides and herbicides and natural turf. And she's planning on doing programming with the Gibraltar schools as well.
Okay.
I don't know if I got all the questions.
Any further questions? Okay, if not, we need to do this one with the voter board because it's an ordinance. And passed 18-0. Mr. Enigal.
I make a motion to accept the report on the amendment of the zoning map of Claybanks.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Okay, then this is a voice vote because we are accepting the report. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, one more time, Mr. Enigal.
I'll make a motion to adopt the amendment of the zoning map to clay banks. And again, the department has up in front if there's any questions.
Anyone? Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always alarming to me when I see wetlands being authorized to be filled. As I've mentioned before, I think we really have to be thinking a little bit more holistically. It's that same analogy. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. We just say, oh, it's just a little pocket here, a little pothole there, little swale area, no big deal. But it becomes a collective problem downstream. Wetlands are the main, function of filtering for and infiltration for our drinking water and for our surface water. And here we are right adjacent to Stony Creek, a creek that our Land Conservation Department is working hard to work with farmers to improve the quality of. I'm just curious, I thought, is it just state law that we can just fill in wetlands? And so I guess that's one question. Is it just state law that we can just fill in wetlands and it's no big deal? Is it a certain size or percentage that we don't care about? If I read right, this is being filled in for parking lot, which is like the biggest insult you can possibly make. I mean, you turn it from something incredibly functional, incredibly valuable to totally the opposite. In that process, okay, so we're making a parking lot then, why is this business not being encouraged to feature that wetland, on their property and as part of their business? Why are they not maybe, and if it comes down to actually, why is that wetland not being used as a rain swale, as a rain garden to actually take the infiltration off the parking lot? Or is that the case? I'm not sure. I'm just reading, it just says, oh, just fill it in. So does that mean that if it's not being used as a swale to actually continue to infiltrate and filter the water, is it being run, is that rainwater being now run quickly over to the wetland to the east, or is it being run right down into the creek so it can run right into the creek without being filtered? I mean, this is just, to me, this just speaks to a failure of our system. And I want to know if it's a failure at our state level or a failure at our land use planning level, because this is just, we're in the 21st century. We know better. Every indication, every study, everybody who knows and everybody who can stop to appreciate knows we need to be restoring and building wetlands, not removing and filling them in. Thank you.
Mariah, you want to?
So this is actually, I think, probably the third time that this property has come before this board with regard to a rezoning, because originally what the Renards planned to do was to renovate and expand their existing building, which is up in the part where it says EA. I'm on page 36 of your packet. That smaller little part that looks like a separate parcel. They were going to redo everything there, and, expand the store, expand the production facility and everything else. And then it became quickly apparent, I guess, that was not going to be large enough. And they had done some rezonings in order to try and make that happen. So then the plan that they came forth with was what came to you last time, which is to rezone that small little red part to commercial center and to put the rest of the stuff on the northwest corner back to exclusive agriculture. And combine everything back into one parcel. The reason that commercial center piece was put there is because the cheese processing production is allowed in exclusive agriculture, but the actual sale of the products is not. And so they needed to rezone that small area to commercial. And the Resource Planning Committee and the County Board felt like it was kind of a swap from what they were doing in the northwest corner to move it to the middle. Then as the part of doing it, the site visits with regard to the conditional use permit process, or I guess after the conditional use permit process, those wetlands became apparent to staff when we went out there. They're not mapped as wetlands. They're not even mapped on the maps that we get from the DNR where they put little dots where they're tiny wetlands that they know are there. It didn't even have the little dots. So we discovered that those were wetlands and had their surveyor and engineers go out and look at them and delineate them. The Renards then went through the process with the Department of Natural Resources and the Army Corps of Engineers to get permission to fill those two pockets of wetland. And then the next step after that is that to meet our ordinance requirements, they need to go through a rezoning process. So even though we didn't have them mapped as wetlands, once we know that they actually are wetlands, they need to go through this rezoning process. I know that doesn't answer necessarily the bigger questions that you have about when or if or how it's okay to fill a wetland, but that's kind of the background that got us to this point. As far as, why can't they reconfigure their project and not fill those wetlands? They are definitely constrained by the wetland that's to the east, and they're making sure that all of their, I think it's their new storage facilities for wastewater, and I mean, I'm using the right language. Actually, Aaron probably knows more than I do. And actually, ironically, for stormwater plans are going to be mostly to the east of where the building is. And there's just not another way to reconfigure the parking and the driveways, because the site plan that would work for them to not fill the wetlands requires too many driveways along County S. The highway department won't let them have that many driveways. So it's probably not ideal, but I think they're doing the best that they can with the lot that they have.
Okay, Vinny?
Thank you. I was vote no on this for RPC for some of the reasons that Bob had, or concerns that Bob had with filling wetlands. I also voted no because they did have a plan to go around the wetlands, which was not convenient for their business model or for their use of trucks and equipment on the land. But in my value system of wetlands, I didn't think that that was a legitimate reason to fill a wetland if there could be another way you do it. Or there could be another parcel of land that you use for this kind of business if it doesn't fit within an area that has wetlands. So that is why I voted no.
Biz?
Thank you, Madam. In the discussion on this project, I'm on that committee. The discussion on this project, what I understood about this, and Mariah or David can correct me if I'm wrong, that years ago, this was actually farmed, this parcel. So we're not talking about the kind of wetlands where you got your boots on and there's water up to your knees. Because it stopped being farmed, cattails came up. So I guess it fits, as wetland, but it's not the kind of wetland that we think of when you're there's a lot of standing water and that, because years ago they did farm it, and maybe they didn't get very good crops of it, but it did farm it, and then they stopped and these cattails came up. So I voted for it because of the reasons that the DOT won't allow them to have these extra driveways to get in there. So because of S being such a busy county trunk. So, that's the way I understood it and why I voted the way I did.
You are correct.
No, go ahead.
You're correct. That area was, that property is still being farmed, and those two pockets were still being farmed as of, I think, 2 years ago. It may be sooner.
David Enigo? I'm sorry, Biz, you finished?
No, I'm just thinking, if it's saying that I'm correct on this, the way I understood it.
Okay.
I think I'll characterize the multiple meetings we had for this particular project as, because this project actually became for us and had revisions done to it because of that space that later on was determined to be wetlands that originally was not defined as wetlands. The original driveways, one of the driveways, which is going to be the primary processing driveway, would have came off of Rosewood, which would have mitigated the hazards on County S considerably of slow moving equipment getting on and off of S for that short jaunt, because that particular cross intersection is where according to them, majority of their trucking and that stuff comes through. But there is slow moving equipment that would come on that. So that was part of the driving factor. The other driving factor was, because we had a long discussion of this particular issue on multiple meetings and caused a revision to the 3 driveways that they planned came before us for. It is now defined as a wetlands. It has been, if you look at the aerial maps through the years, the Bell County aerial maps, you will see that it has been pictures, photographs of it being planted, of it being farmed as land. Clearly a lowland, an area that probably didn't produce too well. But I think there was a fairly healthy discussion. We were not enthusiastic about doing the change probably to the northern one more than the southern one, But in the long run, if you looked at the other characteristics, savings and health and safety concerns and over the other issues of that, had this project never even come before us, we wouldn't have known it was a wetland in the first place because it was never mapped that way. The vote came through 4-1 in favor of moving it forward.
Okay, Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so thank you, Mariah, for the information. I mean, clearly this is you have exemplified our agencies working appropriately between the Land Use Services Department and the DNR, an area that had been, so to speak, abandoned as a functioning wetland is actually recognized as one. I think that's a win. That's an indication that the system is actually working in a good way. And so again, I stick with my point, like this is an awesome opportunity. And I hope the people from Rosewood Farms are listening, like use those wetlands as your rain swales to take all the runoff from your parking lot, replant them as native wet prairies or whatever you need to do to, still help them function as a wetland. This is a wonderful opportunity to do the right thing. And as it stands, I will be voting against this because I don't have clear picture that this, I still am, unless someone tells me otherwise, as far as I'm reading this, this is just going to get filled in, and that water that up until now for thousands of years has been infiltrating in that spot, whether it was a functioning wetland in the ancient past or whether it was a low wet area as a farm field, it was still functioning, recharging the groundwater as it was supposed to, as it has been for thousands of years. I'm a no vote. I encourage a no vote until we can really get the details of these kind of things worked out better. It's a great opportunity for a restoration project, and I think we should be heading in that direction. Thank you.
David Enigal?
I'm sorry, I did forget one more item on this, which was a fairly lengthy discussion of redirecting that hard surface waters off of that area, as well as trying to mitigate how much impact they really do on this land that is now recognized as an environmental concern. The retention ponds that they have planned will be pitched and that stuff to better keep whatever could be on the surface from even getting to the other wetlands further east. So that was a very strong impact. Comments made towards those applicants that this needs to be paid attention to.
What does that mean? Oh. Okay, anything? David Engelbert?
Yeah, just a late comment. I appreciate Dave Engel's last comment because I too was looking at this as the wetland area being a potential retention area for the parking lot. But if they are addressing it in another way before it gets to the large wetland, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, the size of this parcel does require that they get a state-approved stormwater runoff control plan. And like I said, they're also putting in all sorts of different storage units that they didn't used to have, because I know that property has had issues in the past with the way getting into the wetlands, and that will all be remedied.
Anyone else? Okay, then I think we are ready to go to the voter board. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, this is the ordinance piece. So yes, we're going to go to the voter board. So 13-4, it has passed. All right, we will be taking a break, 10 minutes. Be back to start discussing the ARPA funds at 11:15.
David, your
It's
request
in
to
his
speak
wheelhouse,
works.
not in his
Your
job
request to
description.
speak works.
Okay, so we got everybody back.
Well, but it works.
Yep, it's here.
We got you. You can use it.
All right, I think we are all back.
Are we on mute?
Yep.
All right, so we will come out of recess. American Rescue Plan funds, Mr. Pavic.
Okay. So the good news is we're just discussing most of these items today. So we're not asking you to vote or do anything. So it's meant to be a positive discussion in terms of the work we've been doing. And what we're hoping to do is to kind of go through all these projects, get some feedback, and then based off how the discussion goes today, what we would do is that the projects that are ready to start moving forward, we start bringing those forward in the upcoming months. So today's more of a discussion, presentation, input from that aspect. So again, the one item we will be taking action on will be the broadband. That's the only one in my mind that's time sensitive. But let me first start twofold. First one is this little handout, just for context. If you go back to where we initially did our county board retreat and we asked for ideas, this is kind of where the impetus of some of this work is coming from.
Hold on one second. Does everybody have one? They were on at your place?
Yep.
Okay. No? Okay.
Yes, there we go. So again, what we did is we asked all the departments and we actually asked for input from the county board is what, given the guidelines, we know from the recovery funds, what are areas that we'd like to focus on in terms of a county, in terms of projects or initiatives. We had each area, I guess, put together a summary, make a little presentation. And then we went up and we kind of went through the voting process again. And I say voting, I say prioritizing or where we think our level of interest in terms of priorities. So when you look at that sheet, for example, it might throw you off a little bit, but for example, let's just talk some of these through. So under the childcare related projects, we had 4 proposals that were there. In each one of those, we weren't quite sure in terms of how we wanted to support childcare. But in general, both staff and the county board felt in some way, shape or fashion, we need to address this issue. So that's why you see all those scores up on the top where it says childcare related projects. You'll see that big 50 there, right? For example. So a lot of people placed their dots there saying that, yes, we want to do something for childcare, but no, we weren't quite sure what we want to do. We want Joe and Corey to go back and give us the best potential solution of how we could apply some funds to make a difference. That was kind of the directive we got from the retreat. Whereas if we go to the housing related projects, Mariah made a presentation and she had a whole series of projects that were related to housing, another huge initiative for the county to consider. But again, on this one, if you look at it, there was tons of interest in 2 of her projects that she presented. So that's kind of the direction we went from the retreat in terms of trying to refine those projects and see what opportunities we have with those 2 opportunities. So that just gives you a context of how some of that voting works. But in general, what we did is from those input that we got from both department heads and the retreat, and even other ideas that weren't part of the retreat, we had some ideas that were thrown up there. For example, the rural addressing one, which is on the list, was one of those ones that was brought up and people voted and they put their dots and they thought it should be something of a priority because we've been talking about it for a number of years. So again, that gives you some quick history on that part, okay? So now let's just quickly jump just to the staff memo because I think it gives context to our discussion and it helps on that. So again, let me just cover the background, make sure we're all on the same page. So again, we were allocated that $5.3 million in terms of our funding. That'll come in 2 payments. We received 1 last year and we will receive 1 this year, although we do not know the date or the timing for this year's payment. Those funds right now are segregated into their own account. For these projects, anything that we consider the cost must be incurred after March 3rd of 2021, last year. And they must be obligated by December 31st of 24 and expended or by December 31 of 2026. So someone might question, well, what does that mean in terms of obligated and then the expended? And that's one thing I can tell you right now. I've been working with Grant. We are still trying to get further clarification on that. From what we understand right now, if I were to sign a contract for services that had those services obligated through 2026, those would be qualifying expenses that way. It's our current understanding, and we're looking for clarification. It does not mean, though, that I could actually say, I'm going to put money in our account for our projects for 25 and 26. So we can't say we're going to obligate our own funds to ourselves. Again, we're still looking for clarification on that. That's one of the areas we are not 100% certain. Is that accurate to say? So that's just to give you context, okay? Again, based on the rules from the Treasury that were now just published, again, we've, I guess, vetted these projects, and we'll explain why we think these projects are qualifying for use for the ARA funding. As part of this process too, we also conducted a public informational meeting to review these options, and we asked for additional ideas as well. And I thought that was very well attended, and we actually had some very good comments and some very good discussion. I can say for the most part that all of those ideas were pretty much consistent with some of the projects we're talking about, but I'll get to that part in just a second. So now let's quickly just go through the analysis. So with the new rules, what's the best way for use these funds? Really, the best way for us to use them is what's called the lost revenue. What they did is they kind of established it's a rule where if you're under the $10 million, you can just pretty much say that you have lost revenue and claim it underneath that. That is the quickest and easiest way for us to, and I use the word defederalize the funds. In other words, take them one step away further from the rules of the federal government. And it's not anything negative we're trying to evade. It just gives us more flexibility in terms of, one, how we have to administer and report ourselves to the federal government, but then two, gives us greater flexibility of how we can use those funds. There still are some rules that we have to do for that, but it has to be related to government, I guess, operations, which really opens up the door for many, many opportunities. So from our recommendation, that's what we're recommending that we do with the funds. But then once those funds are, again, gone through that process, then make them available for how we would like to do, I guess, our projects. Okay. So let's turn the page, just because it gives you the high level view, or if in your packet, I'm on page 38 now, or page 2 of the memo. So again, of those projects, I kind of have a running budget for you. And this would be, again, this is high level. If we would fund all the things I'm presenting, doesn't mean we are, just give you an idea where we are ballpark. So if you look at those budgets of the funds in those projects, we'll get into each one, but under Health and Human Services, we have the 2 projects listed. Emergency Services is the ES training program, and I call it the countywide addressing. I just put it under emergency services / management, because again, it's one of those items that has been discussed as an emergency management related issue. So again, it's a countywide project. Where it sits or who's administering it, to me, is not as important, more the discussion of the project itself. Likewise, you'll see then the listing for the housing, the broadband, and also the environmental for the groundwater testing and invasive species. Again, if we would fund all those projects as they're shown and listed, we'd still have about $1 million left that we could use for allocation. I say that with a little bit of a pause, because again, I'm still trying to get that clarification on what that 26 versus 24 expended versus obligation means. So for example, if we can obligate some of those funds longer, there might be some opportunities within, let's say, the health and human services area for childcare. If you look at their proposal, they're going through 2024. Is there a way for us to extend that an additional year? That's something that we can look at and clarify. But again, that just gives you an idea of, again, where are we kind of allocating some of those buckets for the use of those dollars. Again, in terms of the comments that were submitted, again, very similar to what our discussions were at the retreat. Top comments were for child care, housing, broadband, mental health, which is also one of the items that we discussed at the retreat, if you recall. And we also had requests for funding for nonprofits, and there are actually 3 nonprofits there. We had just a cursory discussion at the Finance Committee in terms of that process and whether or not we should consider additional projects. But again, I think for that initial request, it was requested by the Finance Committee that we have more discussions with Joe in Human Services for those aspects of those requests. But then there's also, I guess, a general discussion of whether or not we want to go down that path of considering funding any type of nonprofits in the county. So we can have that discussion if you'd like. So then again, just quickly for the recommendation. Again, we're looking at processing the funds. Again, the first round, this through the lost revenue. Again, that the projects that we're presenting today, we're looking just for general feedback, this discussion level. But if we feel that we have a general framework from you today, what you would see is we bring those back to finance next month. And then we start bringing those forward as formal resolutions to start allocating those funds in those areas. Again, for these projects, since they're not budgeted funds, and there's stuff that we're going to do new expenditures, each one would require its own resolution of support with a supermajority. So that's at 15 votes. So.
Okay, I want to let general questions get
Yep.
asked before we go into individuals.
Okay.
Okay, so I see that Bob has asked to speak or to ask a question. And I guess what I'm saying is now's the time for these general broad questions related to what he just presented and things like that. And then we'll go over each one of these separately so you can get your questions answered and you can voice an opinion one way or another so that finance has some guidance. But the only one that then we will come back to and take an action on is the broadband. And that'll happen at the end, after you've heard all of the stuff and got your questions answered. Okay, so Bob, do you have a general question?
Actually, just a super specific clarification, going back to the handout from the retreat. I just want to clarify, and I think this is correct, but I didn't want to assume the red is county board members and the blue was department heads. Is that what the CB and DH stands for?
That is correct.
Just making sure where those, where the votes came from. Thank you.
Vinny?
Okay, thank you. I just had a question, if you or Grant would be willing to just briefly go over the final rules, not entirely, but I'm kind of getting to the aspect that the intention of those, it can even go to individuals, is intended to go to nonprofits, if that's something we decide to do. It's a huge document and I appreciate the summary that was sent and that Jill shared as well, but just a quick overview on how we would be thinking about that for either nonprofits or individuals in need in the county. And if you see other funding sources other than this that would be used instead. Thank you.
So again, with the final rule, the way it was published, they had their general categories that they initially set up. And again, those covered various areas, such, they had specific, I guess what I consider specific areas as well. So one of it was health and human services. A lot of it's related to public health and their response to the COVID response directly. Another one is in regards to, I guess, emergency services in terms of their response. But then they also had other areas of response that you could also apply those funds to. Broadband was an idea. Lost revenue was another idea. Another idea is they had a whole series of, like, I considered sub-projects within that as well. And that's where some of those ideas came up, where you could actually fund organizations outside the government, such as nonprofits, or you could actually do a business recovery program, those types of things. So those are all listed within the rules themselves as qualifying expenses. There is no mandate within that rule that you have to apply those funds in any of those areas. It's still, at that point now, those are the options you have to use. Now it's up to you as the body to decide where those funds go in terms of how they're doing. I think the one thing that I mentioned when we first started this whole process, and even at the retreat, the intention is not that well, there is a restriction. One, you can't apply it to debt. And you can't apply it to any type of, let's say, court settlement. But again, I think the general consensus would be is that the way they're doing it, even if we go through the lost revenue, is that it doesn't just go into your general fund and sit. So I think that's one of the areas where there's restrictions that it goes towards your government operations. But I don't think it'd be the way the rules are written, and their intention would be to say, okay, let's just sit on this money and put it into our general fund and just let it sit there.
Grant, did you want to add anything on the final rule?
Yeah, I have a.
No, hold on, Grant, because Todd is next. I just wondered if he wanted to respond to Vinnie's question.
No, I was going to respond before and I got cut off, so.
We'll get you back.
We'll get you.
We'll get you.
I can just maybe confirm what Ken said. There are 6 general allowable uses of the recovery funds to support public health response, replace public sector revenue loss, water and sewer infrastructure to address negative economic impacts, premium pay for essential workers, and broadband infrastructure. As Ken pointed out, within those 6 general categories, there's whole lists of things that fit. What might be easier is what a county would not be permitted to do, at least under the replacing lost revenue, would be extraordinary contribution to a pension fund, debt service, rainy day or a reserve account, settlement agreement, judgment, consent decree, or judicially confirmed debt, new activity that conflicts with the purpose of the American Rescue Plan Act statute, or violations that would violate an award term and condition or conflict of interest requirements under the uniform guidelines. So
Okay.
it's very broad.
All right, well, it says on the machine here that Todd is number 1, so.
Thank you.
I'm not
And I don't
making
mind.
a judgment.
Don't have to be now, but so I have 2 rather quick questions. So from a declassifying perspective, do we have a time frame by which we need to declare that? I mean, is that going to come before the board in the first quarter, next month? I mean, what's the thoughts around the quote unquote declassification?
That has to, again, that's where the obligation comes in. So that has to be done by December 31st of, oops. That's where the obligation comes in by the December 31st, 2024.
Okay, and if you declassify at all, because part of the public comment was that there's some urgency in some areas, to get at some of this funding if approved by the county. I don't suspect we would wait till then, but I guess the finance department would have, finance committee would have final word on that. The second question I have is that I think as we look at this as a county board, the second thing, or maybe the first thing we should think about as we look at these numbers and how we arrive at spending $4 million or something of that facet, we can't pay off debt, but we should look at not creating debt either. And what I mean by creating debt, might be, if you take a look at this list, I guess it's pretty easy to understand that some of these estimates and some of these topics, are pretty well defined. So if we, allocate a couple $100,000 to invasive species control and we go spray some Phragmites, when we run out of money, we're going to quit spraying Phragmites and there's no lingering debt. But when you take a look at a facility and things of that facet, there's going to be lingering tax implications on us as a county also. And I think as I sit and listen to these ideas, I would hope that before we approve them, we have that thought in mind as to what would be the residual cost for the county beyond the initial expense that comes through this ARPA funding.
Yep, and each project we have a little bit of a write-up, and we'll explain that because that was one of the requirements that was brought up at the retreat. I know it's been mentioned several times at finance is that we look at whatever we do, we also look at the implication of the cost beyond the federal funding itself, and we'll have that discussion for each one of those.
Yeah, right.
Grant, did you want to make a
Just to
comment?
Clarify what Ken had said, because I took Todd's question as being something else. It's absolutely correct. We have to obligate funds by the end of 2024, actually spend or expend funds by the end of 2026. But in terms of making the one-time election, if that's what county board decides to do, to take $10 million as revenue loss without doing the calculation. There is a school of thought, and by we, I mean the counties association is asking Treasury for clarification that that election might have to be made not later than April 30th, 2022. And once you make that election, it's irrevocable. So,
Okay,
Can I have a follow-up to that?
go
You
ahead.
can't do a partial declassification. It's all or none.
no, you could do up to $10 million. So
Okay.
and it's just limited to the amount of money that we've been allocated, which is a $5 million and change. So we could do a partial.
Okay, at long last, Mr. Osted.
Well, Todd stole some of my thunder. I was going to ask another column be added to it on what future funding is needed to keep these projects going or to finish the projects. Or in other words, what impact does it have on our future budgets? That's what I was gonna,
Good.
okay.
David Enigal.
So I'm gonna sound like a broken record, because when I was reading over the cost implications for future years, as the two previous supervisors asked about, I couldn't see where, just taking an example, the ES training program looks, acts, and feels like we're essentially creating new 8 positions over the next 3 years. And I didn't see, an example of where that impacts our future budgets. But the other thing is just a technical question. I see that in the page 38 write-up for the countywide addressing, it lists 800,000, but the page 82 individual page on it shows 1 million. So just technically one or the other is incorrect. And personally, I don't believe even $1 million is enough to do the job correctly. So, but
Okay,
that was just a technical aspect of the numbers didn't match.
any other general questions before we look at each individual one? David Engelbert.
I don't know if my
It did
device
work.
is working.
It
It did.
is.
I had pushed it earlier and.
You were lit up bright.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a question, I guess. Certainly what we did at the retreat was very, very worthwhile. Just wondering if, because of the change in rules, that we're able to use the money towards things that I wouldn't say extraordinary things that we might budget for. And did the department heads have an opportunity to present some other ideas that because of those rule changes? Because we have like the sheriff and communications and even land conservation that have a lot of expenditures that are desires. Maybe they weren't able to express those at that time. I know that that's just maybe a person's opinion on it, but have the rules changed is broadened where we can spend the money.
I guess based off what the new rules have published and what I had said to all the department heads when this initially started, I don't feel that anything has changed from that aspect. I know they still have needs and stuff like that, but when I had presented that, the initial discussion with the department heads and when we brought this forward to the retreat is that they would be in some form or fashion declassified and that any option was on the table.
Okay,
So that was presented from the very beginning.
thank you.
Vinny?
I think you just answered that, but that does mean that from now until the time we need to make final decisions on these, department heads or community members or organizations can bring proposals and be added to this. This is just the first look at what happened at the county board retreat, which I unfortunately was not able to attend, so did not have any votes on here. But just, is that how it would be? Like into the future, more proposals and ideas can come forward. This isn't a final or complete list.
I'd say yes and no. At some point, we're looking for the county board to start making some commitments and start allocating some of this money to the buckets. So again, we can adjust those buckets as we go through some of our discussions. So once those buckets, we start allocating those funds, those are allocated. So I don't foresee it as being a window where we're going to continue to keep on bringing stuff forward. And again, on some of these buckets, we might be making adjustments. Like I mentioned before, once we get clarification, you might allocate some additional dollars to daycare. This is an example, right? So I guess all I'm trying to do is, again, we need to make sure we focus and establish some priorities. I know this is the hardest part. We have tons of needs. I understand that. And We have tons of needs in the community that everyone's trying to do an excellent job, and that's what I love about this county. But again, I guess I also throw caution out to the county board is that I think we need to focus on some big priorities that we've been trying to address and try to focus on that. Again, just for example, Door County, as you know, has more nonprofits than the other county in the state. If we go down that path of saying we're going to open up to all nonprofits to submit and ask for money, how are we going to manage that? How do we prioritize that? And how do we go through that entire process? I'm not discouraging it. But again, if we have other priorities that are higher that we can allocate those funds and make a bigger dent, while we can say it'd be nice to give some of this money out to everyone, I think sometimes you make it more complicated, even though we're doing that process. And again, I'm not discouraging that, but I guess I'm just trying to make sure that we focus on what we're trying to accomplish and what we consider high priorities for the county. So I just leave it at that. So yes, that's why we're here for discussing it, but it's kind of what I mentioned at the retreat too. It could also be a slippery slope in terms of how we open this up.
Morgan?
Right off of your point there, when this meeting started, Help of Door County did submit their proposal. I would like to see that added to the list for discussion. If it's not something that we can include for ARPA funds this round, it could be something that we work with them in the future for.
Okay, so that's my thing is, how do we have that discussion? So we had an opportunity where I did a public meeting. I had one organization show up. We did not do any type of open disclosure that we're actually taking proposals from all the nonprofits in Door County. So in my mind, even though Help of Door County, I commend them for submitting their proposal, but we did not go through I guess what I consider a fully vetted public process to get input from all the other nonprofits. So that's what I want to have the discussion with the county board. If you want to say that we want to allocate X amount of dollars and we're going to make this pool of money available to all the nonprofits and set up a process to get those ideas and get them in, then that's one step. But this is say Help of Door County was the only one that submitted in, so I want to consider that one. I think would be, in talking with Grant too, in terms of a public process, would not be appropriate.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue is we run the danger in discussing this is we've got of kind of creating the illusion that we have 5.x6 or $7 million we can spend however we want. All the other rules still apply. We have to do competitive bidding. We have to do contracts. So in the realm of nonprofits, using a ridiculous example, let's say that the county thought it was, we needed to produce widgets using an old econ model. All right, so we could come up with that idea. We need 25 million widgets in Door County. We aren't going to go to Todd nonprofit and say, we're going to let you build a 25 million widgets. We're going to pay you for it. We're going to put out a competitive bid, a request for proposal saying, okay, the county has this idea. All nonprofits in Door County are eligible to, on a competitive basis, submit an application to do this and solicit proposals or bids from the nonprofits to produce those 25 million widgets. And we would be bound to accept the one that was most beneficial, which typically means the lowest cost and the best quality. So we have to keep in mind that we can't do whatever we want with this money. We have to not only comply with whatever rules are out there that Treasury comes up with, but all our ordinary rules of contracting and bidding and such. So we have to keep that in mind. And at the end of the day, it all has to serve a public purpose, which is at the core of governmental services.
Vinnie?
Thank you. Since we've kind of gone to this nonprofit topic, I would like to just have clarification on what the difference is in our retreat, which I wasn't able to attend, but has United Way listed and has Door County Economic Development Corporation listed, which are also nonprofit outside organizations. So I'm trying to understand how those proposals are in our retreat packet, but then it's not open to other nonprofit organizations to be added to the list. I think maybe those were in prematurely, or I'm not sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I would not say that prematurely. I think the core of the project actually started within Human Services. And again, if you're familiar, especially with the daycare, we've been involved with the daycare initiative for probably almost 2 years now. United Way was part of the, I guess, the lead in terms of the research work, but most of the work in that proposal actually came forward through the work of both Corey and Joe. And the fact that they were able to, I guess, leverage a partnership with United Way based off what they're working on for that childcare initiative only pushed that opportunity further, versus it was not us saying, United Way, let's have you submit a proposal. We're not going to get a proposal from everyone else. I guess this is the context. And in terms that they're listed, is this because of the 2 years of work that United Way has put together to kind of culminate all that research and everything that's been done?
And the only thing I would add is that I think partnership is a really good word. And I think if it's help of Door County or other nonprofit organizations the county does already presently partner with on other activities, I think the same validity could be made. It just depending on the knowledge that we have of the studies they've done and the work they've done in the community. So I would like to see a percentage of funding be made available. The city of La Crosse has done that through their community foundation that goes through and looks at what proposals could be. If that's something that the county doesn't want to do, there are other solutions that could, take place for those proposals, or just direct partnerships with county departments. I'm sure other county departments have community nonprofits that they partner with for all kinds of fundraising and community services they provide. So that partnership model would be appreciated.
Again, I guess the only thing, and it's your pleasure, but again, the only thing I'm just going to push back a little bit is I still think you go back and first establish what you consider your priorities are, how you want to allocate those funds. And then if there's still opportunities based off other priorities that you feel that we addressed or gotten far enough to move the needle on those other ones, then you have that opportunity to pursue that as an option. So I'm not saying it's not a good option, but I still think you got to go back to our core projects we're talking about and figure out if that's where you want to spend those dollars. And then if there's, again, dollars left, again, I'd love to fund all this stuff, but if there's dollars left, then you open up that window of opportunity for some type of process to build those other partnerships as well. So.
Okay, Mr. Enigal.
On the basics of prioritizing and making decisions, I agree with your concern as far as the legal ramifications as a governing body dealing with the monies issues, specifically, the nonprofits and that stuff, the bidding process and all that related stuff, as Corp Counsel mentioned. But to pile on top of the last two questions, then why do we have Mosaic Ventures apartment project here, which is to me a one of three that should be funded things and it should be followed in the same bidding process, where this is a very specific project listed in this group that's not related to a county project. Fits in that same category. We have plenty, through the years, we've done plenty of efforts at affordable housing. We as a county, the people living in Door County.
I would ask you to hold that thought, and then when we get to the Mosaic, talk about it.
It's really
That's
okay. I'm fine with that. That's why I hesitated, but the fact remains it's still related to the very question the last two supervisors asked. So
there's context to that as well. We'll get to it.
Other general kinds of questions before we get into specifics. Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. General thought. I think when I think in terms of this money coming to us to address issues that were made or exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. The COVID pandemic, when I stop and kind of just think about the last couple of years, the COVID pandemic really exposed the weaknesses in our society and the needs of our community. And the things that really resonate with me and the things that seem that need to be done the most involve the health of our community, whether it's the physical health, actually trying to ameliorate the effects of a pandemic such as we've been having with COVID. So that I guess the physical health of our community and the mental health of our community are the two things that are absolutely the highest priority for me. And I think that's what our constituents are really looking for, positive impacts in those areas. We can't have a healthy economy if people are homesick, and if people are having issues with mental health, which those are on the rise, and the isolation of COVID pandemic hasn't helped. I just really see whatever we can do to ameliorate the ailments that have come to us in physical health ways and mental health ways. I think of the things that our Health and Human Services Department has been working on. I think of premium pay for essential workers. I think people in the Health Department and the Health and Human Services Department, those social workers, they all need a raise. And we need to, whatever we can do for the health of our community, because our economy is based on our health. If we're not healthy, we don't have a good economy. So I see that as the biggest bang for our buck. The most efficient investment is to be looking at our physical and mental health issues. Thank you.
Steve, did you
Yeah.
want to make a comment?
Yeah,
And
if I
then we have
could,
another-
please. I've been hearing a lot of comments about dealing with nonprofits and giving the ARPA funds to that. One thing that we have to be careful about is if we start giving these monies to other organizations throughout the county, us, meaning the county or myself or my department, was responsible to make sure that these organizations are utilizing the funds that they say they are. So if we're giving out, a couple $100 to all these organizations, we have to go out, meaning myself, my department, or somebody here in the county has to make sure that if they're saying they're going to do it for this, for whatever reasoning, by whatever they say they are, we have to make sure that they have proof and some type of recording mechanism, software, or whatever, that they are utilizing those funds for that. Because when you're dealing with federal funds, our auditors are going to make sure and look at it and say that, okay, you've given it to this organization. How did they utilize the funds? And we have to come back and report and say, yes, they did, or making sure that they didn't use it for, just for example, I'm not saying that they would, but like a vacation or something like that. But so I just want to make that comment. And then by all means, I'm not saying that we cannot give it to any nonprofits or anything, but we just got to be very careful of the monitoring. And I think Ken and Grant have alluded to that earlier in the conversations, but we have to be monitoring that type of stuff. And so I just want to make that.
Thank you. Rodney?
Okay. I just wanted to concur there with Bob that I believe mental health should be kind of prioritized, and there should be an importance there. I think in terms of the COVID, it's been hard on people, even youth, all different ages of people. And could be something as simple as, plowing a couple trails or something, having more outdoor activities. I know in Door County, there's a lot of clouds and people have seasonal affective disorder. There's, mental issues. And I think, encouraging people to get outside, get exercise, it helps with all that. It could be, even if COVID were to continue, it'd be proactive to have people healthy, do stuff outside. If I look actually as an example, Kiwani, they have the sledding hill, the skiing and all that. I'm not saying we should necessarily do that, but there's a lot of other things maybe to be considered. And if you look at the list, I think there's good ideas, but I'm not sure there's how many are all mental health related to. So I guess that's
Okay. I'm not seeing any others, so maybe we're ready to look at individual projects. And the first is administration broadband.
Yep, and that one,
And remember, this is one that we need to take an action on today.
so, and actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to defer it to the last one, because that way I'll go right into the resolution right after. That's
Fine.
okay?
So
Okay.
we're going to move to sober living facility. Is that what you're saying?
Actually, the next one on the list would be in your packet is page 42. So it'd be the emergency services.
Oh, so the agenda is not in the same order.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna go through the pack order. What's your preference? I can cover whatever order you like. Okay, I'll go off the packet just because you can kind of go through your computers at the same time. So how about this? I'll do a quick high level summary. cover the major points, and if there's detailed questions, let's have the department head come up and speak as well. So when I hit these, I know Aaron, so I'm covering for Aaron right now, but I'll have the department head come up when it comes up to their project. So the first one, this emergency services, what they're looking at doing is a training program for their EMTs, advanced EMTs and paramedics. They're looking at a 2 to 3 year project, again, based off the allocation of how we can spend those funds. And again, what we do is offset their educational expenses to get their required licenses for operations. But there will also be some protection in our standpoint in terms of if they would leave employment, why we're still providing funds towards those things. So in terms of the obstacles, if you go through the sheet, they're all laid out the exact same way. We have the description, the actual budget, the timeline, and then obstacles and what's the long term. And again, for the long term, we do not foresee any additional costs once this program is completed, unless they want to pursue it and try to get other grant opportunities. In other words, once the funding would be gone, this program would be done. So there's no long-term obligation for that.
So I see a question from Todd.
So one of the things that we talked up pretty big about this initiative, and I really do believe in this, that it was going to be a recruitment aspect of it to create numbers. When I read this, it looks like it's existing further education. Is there a recruitment point to this also?
Yes. So part of it would be for existing staff, but also recruiting staff, especially our part-time. So if you recall how we do a lot of our filling, we have our 24 core staff, and then we have a series of what we call we consider really the part-time employees, our whole bank. So a lot of those individuals have opportunities to, I guess, step up or even try to get individuals to actually come into the part-time ranks. And if we can give those educational opportunities, that would definitely be a recruiting tool.
Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then, so following on that, so just say we don't fund this, so then the challenge or the problem is it's sort of, I'll just paraphrase it, and you can add or delete or fill in or move on. But if we don't fund this, we sort of maintain the status quo of being challenged by keeping and attracting and maintaining a strong workforce for emergency services. Is that sort of a good summary?
Yes.
Thank you.
Morgan?
Is the education that's being proposed here the baseline training to get into to be in the EMS, or is this an additional education? Is this above and beyond training for these individuals?
It depends on their licensing. So one, to become an EMT, there's a certain number of hours for education. To become an advanced EMT requires more. Become a paramedic is another level. And there's actually, I forgot the exact terminology, someone might know before I do, but there's another level above paramedic that allows them to do even additional stuff that also has training requirements for that. So it'd be an opportunity for, I guess, each one of those levels to get that opportunity as far as education.
As it stands now, is that paid? Is that budgeted? Is that paid for out of pocket? How do you obtain?
We do the training that we provide right now is the training that's required for them to maintain their licensing, and the training that's Aaron defines as that, but we do not provide training right now as an incentive for our existing employees or employees we're trying to bring in.
Okay, thank you.
David Enigo?
So this is back to one of my questions earlier. It says, recommend the committee select students work the department for a certain length of time to ensure. Now, when I initially read this, I read this as a recruitment item. Then Supervisor Thays brought up a continued education equivalent, CEUs in my world. And I think we're still kind of bouncing back and forth in that, in the sense of recruitment would qualify as bringing some level of employee that's a lower level employee to a higher level of capacity in that. But here we are talking again, what's the long-term costs of what happens with the ARPA funds that are gone? Well, to me, the long-term costs are, if we're doing this as a recruitment plan, then we're missing the fact that we're talking long-term cost of new employees, or even shifting the cost of lack of a good number, a $20,000 a year employee to a $50,000 a year employee. That's the kind of piece of paperwork that several of us supervisors have mentioned earlier, that in my mind, as a broken record for me, is an ongoing expense that I need to consider when I look at these kinds of choices to spend money.
I understand your point, but I don't I guess I'm going to disagree with you on that because right now we budget at the paramedic level for our operations and that's our desired goal. So for individuals that are coming in as EMTs or we're trying to advance them up to that level, we have that anticipated within our costs themselves. So I understand what you're saying, but we're not intentionally trying to get someone a license just so we pay them, your example, 20,000 one year and 30,000 the next year. Now I have a deficit of $10,000 because of this training program. That's not the case with this one.
I still see a long-term statement that's missing in this paperwork. There is an expense to additional training. There just is.
Okay, Alexis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to provide some comments that I heard at the emergency services part of this. And if Aaron's on, I hope he can speak more eloquently than I can on it. But just to highlight that when the department went through the most recent recruitment, they did go through and promote, I guess, their internal part-time staff to these positions that, again, just to reiterate that this training is things that the staff are already looking to do as they move through the ranks from EMT to paramedic. And this is a recruitment and training tool that would help offset the personal costs to them alone, and provide a tool for the department to attract and retain the staff that they're already needing and budgeting for. So I don't see how a training program leads to more positions or staff costs. I'm not making that leap in my head. So I just wanted to fill in what we had heard from the director. Thank you.
Vinny?
Thank you. Since we're discussing this now, I'd just like to keep in mind that this might be an excellent use of these funds for other departments that also have staffing challenges to offer as recruiting incentives and incentive for either joining as an employee for an empty position that's unable to be filled or continuing to stay. So I think it's a great model that they set forward for that.
Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, I guess as I read this, if they're able to do some training for 3 years and then Aaron indicates here they will continue to work to secure other grants, but regardless, even if after 3 years that they don't have any more money for training, we invested the money, it did a good thing for the department. So I guess I don't see a continuing expense. We're just incentivizing and helping the department for at least 3 years. And then I guess this is a question that probably needs to be asked of each of these requests. And maybe, Mr. Administrator, you can speak for Aaron. We have a request, it's a certain amount of money. What if we say, okay, we're going to fund this at 50%? Is this a project that can still benefit from a reduced amount of funding? Just a hypothetical question. Thank you.
Yes, so like in this one, obviously, the way it's designed, he put together a budget based off it. He put in terms of projections as far as the number of staff he could support or recruit. But I mean, I was going to answer yes, if you reduce it, you can't do as many opportunities or you modify it to provide partial funding, that type of thing. So yes, to the answer.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions or comments. So we move on to childcare initiative, right?
Yep.
Next in the packet.
So for the childcare, I know, Joe, you'd like to come up, but I know Corey did a bulk, a lot of this work. So Corey, maybe could you come up to the podium? I think since they're here and she's done so much work, it behooves me to give her the justice to present it, so.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, in your packet, you have the proposal we've put together. We do propose partnering with United Way. They've been, actually, it's much more than 2 years. The 7 years since I've joined the department, we've been looking at childcare. I know it started long before that, but there's been a really concentrated effort over the past 2 years to do a very comprehensive community study of the childcare needs. The pandemic definitely made the already crisis situation even worse. We see it as an employer. We see it with the clients we serve. We hear it from our employers in the community, the schools that we work with. It's affecting everybody. There's a huge gap in childcare. I outline in the proposal, a new development is that United Way, at the same time we were putting together this proposal, United Way was also writing a grant for a Wisconsin Innovation Grant, and they were successful in getting that, which is great news. So that will go a long way to addressing the childcare needs in the community. Our proposal strives to kind of augment what they're doing through that grant. There are still many unmet childcare needs. So we propose to really focus this proposal more on the in-home childcare structure. The grant that United Way already has is focused on our group centers, which is a great thing. We need to expand those. We need to create more slots for childcare in the centers, but that is not a good fit for all families, and it will still not fill the entire childcare gap that we have. Sometimes group centers are out of reach for families economically, and in-home provides a better choice for people. Just to be completely transparent, one of the things that we included in here was for a full-time coordinator at United Way. They also included that in the other grant that they got. So there is an ability to fund the coordinator without these funds. The reason we kept it in here, well, first of all, we had already written this before we got word of the approval, but because that coordinator would focus strictly on the group centers, we put it in here as a way to offset that cost, free up more of those grant dollars to go to the direct services, and also ensure that the coordinator could focus on the family-based childcare and some of the broader issues in the community. We do have lots of contractual relationships with United Way already. So we pass through other state and federal funds to United Way for mental health and substance use services and other programs that we do in partnership with them. And likewise, they pass some grant funding on to us for things like Stride Mental Health Initiative in the schools. So we have a long history of working in very close collaboration and monitoring those contracts very closely. And if this is approved, myself and other members of our staff would be involved in every bit of the process that they're going through, just as we have been for the past 2 years. There would be no ongoing costs. We made it very clear that this funding would only be for 3 years unless the county board would decide to extend that for another year if it's allowed under the rules. But one of the benefits of working with United Way is they have a strong track record of bringing in other funding sources. If there is no funding from any source after 3 years, this still will go a long way to stabilizing the infrastructure for childcare. If there are some ongoing needs, I'm very confident that United Way could raise the funds to continue some of those projects if needed.
Questions for Corey? David Enigal.
Question for all of these applicants or these projects we're considering. She brought up a valid point. An opportunity arose to get funding to another direction that might impact the titles used on this form. In this case, FT coordinator. In a similar scenario where an opportunity arises for one of these projects to acquire monies for part of the project that duplicates a similar function, is there ramifications of specifically spelling out this coordinator designation in this case? And $60,000 for each one of the 3 years, or 61, 2, and 3, 1 and 2. As far as not being able to use that money because it's might be funded through a different route. This is for the administrator really, or maybe Steve or even Grant may be able to answer that question. Just so we get applications that don't cut them out of the ability to use monies in a way because of the way it's titled.
Well, if I could address part of that, Ken, and maybe you have something to add. I will say that when United Way wrote their proposal for Wisconsin economic development, we wrote a letter of support and highlighted in that letter that we would be seeking ARPA funds to support a coordinator position and intended to partner with them. So United Way's proposal made it clear that there was some possibility that the coordinator might be funded through another route, and then they would redesignate their Wisconsin Economic Development grant to fund other initiatives. So from that perspective, I don't think it would jeopardize the larger grant in any way. Whether or not it would jeopardize the ARPA funds, I guess, is a question for Grant or Ken.
Yeah, and that's why I guess you're the first one to bring up an example where it is very conceivable of a project coming up and finding funds for a similar function. And how do we handle that?
Well, again, with some of this stuff, we're actually again, leveraging some people. So there might be some opportunities, for example, with this coordinator, that they might find some other grant opportunities, or even like, I'm gonna pick on Erin's area for some of her projects where there could be other grant opportunities. But I think what we're trying to do, as long as we're defining how we're initially spending our funds, and then we use the grants to leverage whatever we're doing further, it would be the best way for us to pursue it. So in other words, we spend our allocation of those dollars first, but we try to leverage whatever we're doing to go further versus duplicating it. So
Yeah, my intent is just to make sure we understand the ramifications of accidentally duplicating a set of words for the most part in one of the forms or the other.
Any other questions on the childcare proposal? Okay, moving on to, thank you, Corey, for all the work you did on this. This is,
Joe.
Yeah, sober living crisis diversion.
Good afternoon. Thanks for an opportunity to present to you. I do want to make a general comment just about some of the stuff I've heard about mental health, if that's okay, not specific to this proposal. I think it's great to hear that kind of support. I do think one of the things that we looked at in both these proposals were that they were things that were kind of end projects where we were pretty much done with the project. I think part of what we will be challenged with if we went further down the road with mental health stuff is to do something that's sustainable. I think that we could figure some things out that would be short-term, but this is not a sustainable money for us going forward, and we know that. So in terms of the sober living idea, this is not a new concept for us. We have been looking at this for years. If you remember, at one point we talked about trying to use the house on Michigan Street that we used to own before we took it down as an option for exactly what we're talking about here today. I want to go through some background stuff, and sorry, finance folks, you heard this last couple weeks ago. But when we start thinking about treatment, there are different options that we use. There are outpatient treatment services, there are intensive outpatient treatment services, and then there are residential and transitional services. Residential is what you think of when you think of the 28-day treatment program where somebody goes in and they stay there. And so after those 28 days, they return home or they go to something called the transitional living facility. We used to call them halfway houses. There's a lot of different kind of names for them, but that's a longer term facility where people can stay so that they can learn how to stay sober in the community. They're not in this treatment center. They're still going to work. They're going to recovery meetings, that kind of stuff. But they're in the community trying to figure that out. So that background is important for you to kind of understand, because that's the transitional place is what we're talking about here. But I also want to talk a little bit quickly about trends for chemical use in Door County. Alcohol is our biggest area of concern or problem. Folks have the most problems with alcohol in Door County. That's not different than when I moved up here as an alcohol and drug abuse counselor in 1993. Still our number one diagnosed issue. Marijuana is second, but we are quickly gaining with the use of opioids and methamphetamines. And so in 18 and 19, we treated about 10 individuals in that category. And in 20 and 21, we treated 20 each year. And so part of what we're looking at is an increase. And part of the reason that that's significant is the issue that happens with addiction with those drugs causes people's need for treatment to extend to longer periods of time. So again, just another factor in what we're looking at here. So what we're looking at doing with this proposal is literally just trying to buy a facility. We have two outside companies. They are peer organizations that run other sober living facilities in other communities in Northeast Wisconsin. They would partner with us, one of them, we would have to contract with, to come in and run the services in the building that we're looking to purchase. We would like to be able to use the funding to have a home so that when we send individuals out to treatment, that they could come back to our transitional living facility. They could live here in our county, still go to work, still be connected to their families and their natural resources, but have a place where they can practice being sober in a more structured environment than they would typically come home to. This year, or last year, 2021, we spent just short of $60,000 on transitional care for individuals with methamphetamines or opiate addictions. So one of the questions that keeps coming up is, what are the ongoing costs? There would be ongoing maintenance for a home if we bought a home. We know that. And we would have to figure out a way to fund it. I don't have that in a proposal. I'm not exactly sure what that would be. I think that depends on what type of building we buy, how much work goes into it up front. But obviously there would be ongoing care, and that would not be something that that our maintenance folks would want to do or probably be able to do. And so we would have to figure out ways to take care of that. Some of that might be able to be done through the residents that live there and or the company that's running the organization or the facility for us. So there are options for us to do that. In terms of ongoing costs, we are going to have ongoing costs as long as I'm going to be here for residential care for residents. In my mind, it makes way more sense for us to pay for a service here than to pay $50,000 or $60,000 to have somebody in a service in Appleton, where again, they still have to transition back to Door County. So the other alternative that it provides for us that we had at once upon a time, we had a company here called Kimberly House. It was a sober living facility. And what we did at that time is we sent almost nobody to residential treatment. Those individuals went and lived at Kimberly House. They went into our intensive outpatient treatment program, which is 3 or 4 visits a week while they were in that facility. And then they could stay at home. We could put them in a place for 3 or 4 months for a third of the cost of sending them to a residential facility, which for next or for this current year is about $6,000 for 28 days. So the last option that this would provide us, and there'll be some, we have to figure out how this would work, but would be a crisis diversion option for individuals who we are currently sending to mental health facilities. And again, it would be short-term stay, have to be able to monitor people. But right now we're paying $1,500 a day to send somebody to Winnebago Mental Health Center or another mental health institute. We wouldn't be able to divert all of those placements. A lot of them would not be able to be diverted, but a few would also be able to go to this type of a facility. Just looking at my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. We currently have some additional funding for this project. We wrote 2 grants. One that the funding actually ends at the end of March of this year. And then we have another grant from April through March of 2024 for an additional $50,000 in state AODA block grant money that we can put towards this project as well.
I wonder if you might comment on the impact that not having the local crisis place in the community, the impact on the sheriff's department and other agencies. I mean, I realize somebody's not there, but I have heard comments from them as to how this would assist the sheriff's department as well.
Well, one would just be transportation issues in a particular evening. So if we're out on a crisis call and we have an individual who needs to be hospitalized, they're often then transported to Winnebago. So law enforcement is having to call in people off duty, come in, bring folks down to the hospital. It would obviously shorten the time and transportation. I think it would provide potential, again, transitional living facility for people coming out of the jail setting that need that AODA treatment. So there are other alternatives or other benefits, probably for other community partners or other county agencies as well.
Hold on, the mic's not on. Okay.
That was just a note. Did you touch on the rent aspect? You mentioned that.
I didn't.
Okay.
Thank you. So as we look at how do we fund treatment services, right now, kind of how it works is if Joe needs to go to treatment, we sit down with him, we talk about the options, we explore those, and we do basically a loan. We have him sign an agreement that says you're going to pay X amount of dollars if we send you to Jackie Nitschke Center or Nova Treatment Center or any of the other ones that we contract with. Here's how much it's going to cost you for 28 days. Those individuals sign a commitment to pay us back. I'm being honest, some of the time they pay us back and some of the time they don't. When we used Kimberly House and with the other sober living facilities that we are kind of talking with and negotiation with. Individuals who live there can just pay rent. So we are not paying for treatment services. Again, we would provide the treatment services through Health and Human Services. They would be living in a facility with a peer mentor or peer support person in that facility, but the rent would be paid or could be paid by the individual. So if they had a job, they can pay the rent. Some of that rent is $400 or $500. Again, there's grant funding to help offset that, which is why it's so low. So that is definitely an option for us and a way for us to decrease, again, our costs when we're sending people out. There are times at Kimberly House where the county, we use county funds or block grant funds to pay for someone's residential stay if they weren't employed or if they were disabled and couldn't work. And again, we use that to offset our costs of having to send somebody to residential. But individuals would pay rent in this facility regardless if they were employed.
Ken?
I was just gonna add one thing too, that I know we talked about opioids and stuff like that, but also recall we had the settlement on the opioid stuff, that funding will also be coming in. So that also would be opportunity to use those dollars because it has to be allocated towards addictions. So again, it's another opportunity that's not part of this discussion. Just wanted to mention that.
Beth?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, we did receive some correspondence from a constituent who felt strongly that we should incorporate green initiatives into this facility and possibly the Mosaic Venture Housing. I'm just wanted to mention that, but I'm guessing that would be very expensive on we're probably gonna be purchasing an older home, just researching solar panels, roof. So I just wanted to clear that up for that constituent. And be courteous of that this probably wouldn't be a project that would be cost effective. If you could just speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple months ago, some of the committees gave me some permission to go out and take a look. Obviously, housing is going really fast, but it has been older buildings that we've been looking at. There's currently a building that we've looked at, Wayne and I, that I think would be an option for us. But again, we'd be doing some remodel within those buildings, but it's existing structures. I would think that would be cost prohibitive to be able to bring them up to that green level.
Vinnie?
Thank you. I have a lot of support for this project, and I'm wondering if, and maybe I might have missed in some of the reports, but as far as number of beds and like, do you think this will cover? It's hard to predict what treatment needs are going to be every year, but it'll put a good dent in it, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I feel like it's almost impossible for us to predict that, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this in the finance committee a week ago. In the first 3 quarters of 2021, we spent about $230,000 on, this is not the treatment portion, but the mental health portion of things. And in the last 3 months of the year, we spent more than that. And so we don't have much control of that. The ebb and flow comes as the consumers come to us. I would say we average 5 to 10 people a year that are going to a residential facility, and we definitely could handle that if we had our own space here. I do think if we had a sober living facility, we probably would see more folks coming forward to ask for services. So I do think that might have some increase. And again, I think we provide most of the counseling services through our own agency. But a prediction of, there's an ebb and flow in year to year that's been a little different for us. I can tell you that since Kimberly House closed, our residential expenses for AODA services have definitely gone up.
Thank you. That really helps.
Any other questions on this project? Alexis.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment, I guess. And I wanted to speak earlier, but you touched on it. Do you have permission now from the necessary oversight committees to be looking and feel like you can explore this? I know that one of the other proposals for broadband is time sensitive and we're moving quickly on that. I feel very strongly, and I have heard from other folks on the board that this is an initiative, and you said that you've worked on this a long time. Do you feel like you're at a position where we can move quickly on this one as well? Or am I'll let you answer that question.
I would say probably not.
Okay.
I mean, I've gotten permission to take a look at some buildings and look for options. I think I'm waiting for the go ahead to move forward with the project. So that's kind of where we're at. But no, I think that we wanted to present all the options to the board and get some decisions about where to go next.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I can make an opinion, have an opinion, and I would like to support this one as well. Referring back to the caller who spoke about the league study, the people that we interviewed, and it was everybody from the DA to the sheriff to Department of Health and Human Services, public defenders, other agencies in the community. This is the one thing every single one said would make it possible to have more successful outcomes for people who have these issues. And we are going to pay for this treatment and these crisis beds somewhere else if we don't pay for them here. So this is like this rare, once in a generation opportunity to use this money. So.
Right, but I just want to follow up. That's what I had said. And I had hoped that this one would be coming forward too as something that could move quickly. So I'm supportive. I know a lot of people are. So any way that we can move on this quickly, I think there's support for that. So thank you.
David Enigo?
What size building what are you planning for number of individuals capacity wise? I know it's a hard question to answer, really.
To be honest, it's dependent on the facility and the options that we have. I would say if we could get 6 to 10 beds, that would be great. There are rules, and if I'm being honest, I don't know exactly what those rules are. It depends on what type of facility. So if it's peer run, if it's a CBRF, there are different classifications that you can get for it. With those rules come how many people can be in a bedroom, how many bathrooms you need. And so it really then also starts to look at size of building. One of the options that I've currently looked at, I think we probably could get 8 beds in. I don't know if we would fill 8 beds. I'm confident we would probably keep 4 beds filled most of the year. And again, I'd like the option of being able to provide male and female beds. So we've been looking at places that are 2 different stories with bedrooms on each story. And so we're looking at I'm looking for any option I can. But I would say ideally 6 beds as a minimum and up to 10 or 12.
Okay, so you ended up answering the series of questions I would have had afterwards, which were directly related to building code and so forth. But presumably you are researching the zoning obligations as well.
I'm
Because the
relying
city of
on
Sturgeon
Wayne
Bay
for
would
that.
different be, the villages would be different, the towns, counties, as you know.
Yeah, so the facilities that I've looked at that I thought were possibilities, I've gone with Wayne, and we've had some conversation with folks at the city already. So each building, we would have to kind of redo that.
And tentatively, you're looking in the city neighborhood.
Correct. We need individuals to be close enough to be able to participate in our intensive outpatient treatment program that we do in this building.
Thank you.
You bet.
Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asking the generic question, kind of the hypothetical example that I posed last time, like, could this be funded for less? Could this project happen at a 50% funding?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and so I think that's a good clarification that this is a project that there's a certain size, it has to be that size. Reviewing the comments at the bottom as far as long-term and also some of the comments you made, I guess maybe I would actually submit to my fellow supervisors that maybe this one should have a higher price tag, because maybe we would like to fold in some building maintenance and some of those long-term costs for the building itself that we actually can already anticipate. Maybe those should be in there. Anyway, just a suggestion or thought. Thank you.
Vinny?
This maybe will help for all of these, but what would be the next process to move this forward? Broadband had a date. I feel like this has a date, even if we don't have an exact date on the calendar, just for the work that's already been done and the need we have in the community. And we know it will take quite a long time to get it up and going. So the sooner we can secure these funds and move forward, I would appreciate.
No more comments, so I think we can move on. Thank you, Joe. Aaron, soil and water. This is which one? Oh, this is the water quality.
Hello, everyone. So we're going to start with the groundwater screen for emerging contaminants, and the packet on page 55 has that project description. We know that groundwater quality is our primary resource concern in Door County. The majority of our residents get their drinking water source from groundwater, and we have been actively working on a program in the last few years to encourage routine testing of private wells, because many people will say to me, I tested my well once and it's fine, and I don't need to worry about that. Because of the sensitive geology and the setting of Door County, we also know that contaminants on the ground surface can make their way into the water that we're drinking, and it can change rapidly. And so we've been working to promote with public health and the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh lab to promote routine testing of private wells. It builds a database of groundwater quality for us, but most importantly, it tells people, it signals to them the importance of routinely testing their wells. Right now, our program is bacteria and nitrates. Those are the two most common parameters, but they're indicator parameters as well. So if you think about it, if you have a well with nitrate levels that are above that threshold where you start to need to be concerned about surface contamination, bringing nitrates into your well, that's an indicator that there's other things in your water as well, in your well water as well. So this project takes our groundwater testing to another level. And it looks at chemicals that are not, I called the project emerging contaminants, but it's only emerging in that people are talking about them and being aware of them. We know that these chemicals are a concern. There's data indicating that they're here in Door County groundwater in detectable levels. But if somebody were to ask me, is PAH a concern for our groundwater in the wells that people are drinking their water from? I don't have any data to support a statement either that it is or where it is or what kind of a problem it is. So what we're proposing is $280,000 of funding that would go towards testing these chemicals that are very expensive to test, that a homeowner would not be able to do on their own, and to do a screen. And so we would be looking across the county. We would be very strategic and deliberate in the way that we design the program, working with UW Oshkosh, who's working with us already. So building on that partnership again, to frequently monitor a series of wells for these parameters. I listed them in 2 tiers. I think all of them are important, but one of the questions that you've been asking about whether or not a project can move forward with different levels of funding. I listed in consultation with UW Oshkosh, we listed the parameters that we think are very important, but we did break them out into 2 groups for you. As far as the future, really we would use this data to identify where we would need to go. We wouldn't have long-term costs associated with this program as far as obligations towards continuing the monitoring or anything along those lines. So that's the program in a nutshell, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any? You either answered every possible thing or you put them all to sleep. I don't know.
There you go.
Well, I see open eyes, so I hope that it's not sleeping.
Okay, all right, moving on.
So the second project is non-native Phragmites control. Soil and Water, together with DCIS partners, have been leading the way in invasive species control for years. We have a really strong program, existing partnerships, and really our limitation in getting a handle on Phragmites is funding. That's what we need. We know where the Phragmites is, included in your packet on page 42 is a map of our inventory. So every year we hire seasonal staff and they inventory Phragmites populations. We know where they are. We need the funds to hire a contractor to be able to control them. We do seek grants actively every year. We get funding to work on our invasive species priorities, but it's a patchwork. And so we end up with inconsistent control in different areas that are grant eligible. This project would allow us to target the populations of Phragmites comprehensively across the county. So I would entertain any questions at this point.
Vinny.
I just have a comment. I think both of these are great proposals for groundwater quality and for protecting natural areas. So thank you for presenting about them.
Alexis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Erin, what would be, if you could put a estimated budget for also including native seeds as part of the project? Native, yeah.
Yeah, I like where you're.
Oops, sorry.
I like where you're going with that. That's one of the things that, yeah, that's one of the things that we think is really important is not only that you kill the bad plants, but that you encourage repopulation of native plants. I would say we typically focus on controlling the Phragmites first before looking for the native seed costs. So I can't give you a number off the top of my head. I could certainly always spend additional funds. We might be able to look to other sources of funding for those native seeds as well, because it's highly variable depending on where the population is. If it's in a homeowner's, the back edge of their yard, they may want to do something different than if it's along a road right of way.
Vinny?
I didn't mean to push.
Okay. David Engelbert.
As at finance, I'd like to lend some support to these programs. I think the rural areas and even the city areas draw our water from our groundwater sources, and getting a better handle on what pollutants are out there besides nitrates and phosphorus are really important. And as far as Phragmites, we can see how they're spreading up and down certainly the highway coming into Door County, but they're moving into the wetlands and stream corridors, and they're going to spread almost exponentially, I think. Areas like the Gardner Swamp or Gardner Marsh are, getting some of that, and we could potentially see those areas totally grown over with Phragmites.
Okay, David Enigo.
This is actually more of a generalized question after listening to the different presentations here is most of these individuals are representing a department that has an oversight committee. Presumably there'll be some level of report for anything given to those oversight committees when these projects are approved and they process through. We will be having some kind of rather detailed response, I'm presuming, before the county board for each one of these as they progress through. Probably more of a question for the administrator.
Well, I guess I didn't clarify. I'm not sure what you're asking me.
It's one thing for us as a county board to be required, the ones required to approve the use of these monies for this purpose. Sometimes we get forgotten that it'd be nice to eventually hear the reports on those same things before the county board. Sometimes things get approved at the county board level, but then only go as far as reports to the subcommittees. The group of 21 on each one of these things, because they do impact all of us, and we had to make the decision to spend the money.
No, I guess for these projects, again, since we're actually using them as, as the R dollars, I guess I would consider them all special projects, and the county board to be apprised, whether it's another memo that I track with all those projects in progress. But I do think that with this type of a project, we'll want to have that being very transparent, not only for the county board, but for the public in terms of our performance of the use of those dollars.
Okay, Bob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Both of these projects are laudable. I would even say that if we have the opportunity to fund these, especially the groundwater screening at a higher amount, getting 20 wells scattered around the county is going to be a great initial snapshot. I think it could be easily argued that 20 or so is not enough, and maybe we should be looking at a lot more wells than that. So, and again, I think, because homeowners aren't spending the money to test for these things that are highly difficult to test for, pharmaceuticals in the drinking water coming from septic fields or whatever, that sort of thing. I really think, I would argue that especially the groundwater one probably should be funded at even a higher degree so that we could get even a bigger snapshot, because I think it's that important. And yeah, any support for the invasive species team. I know I've been saying this for years, way before I was even on this, had the privilege of sitting in this seat, that if we have a dedicated person in the county with a pair of gloves, a shovel, a loppers, and a backpack sprayer or a little bottle of herbicide, who is paying attention to those weeds that pop up in the ditch and who has the knowledge to know, hey, that's a little patch of garlic mustard, or hey, that's the first sprig of Phragmites. That sort of prevention gets us to a place where we're not dealing with these hundreds of thousands of dollars control. So any kind of support to that prevention, the education and prevention side of the invasive species team is always a good thing. Thank you.
Vinnie?
I have a clarifying question for this process. You had said in the beginning that it would take a resolution for each one, as we're going to look at later today for broadband. Are these resolutions coming to us in an order, or are they coming all at the next county board meeting? And how is that order determined? Thank you.
Well, I guess out of my mind, I'm observing the county board and their interactions. I know the finance committee is taking those same notes. And it'll be up to discretion, I guess, in my mind, of the finance committee based off your feedback on these discussions of whether or not they're prepared to come forward or not. So everyone that we're talking about, I'm taking notes in terms of either comments or clarification. We'll bring those back to finance, and if they're ready to go, we'll bring them back up. So that's what I'm intending to do, unless I get guidance otherwise.
Just quick general clarification, might not know exactly, but I mean, do you have are we thinking 1 month, 3 months, 6 months? Just as getting back to the county board. I know it will depend on each project, but if a project has all the questions answered, feels like there's support today for it, what would be the quickest possible time it could come back, do you think?
Next month. I think some of these are ready to go. And
okay,
like the ones you're hearing right now in the groundwater, both of those are ready to go. So if we get clarification from the finance committee that they want to bring those forward, that's ready to go.
Okay.
The daycare, I think, is also been fully defined. It's been worked out. I know there's some details that have to be worked out, but the allocation of the funds are ready to go. Joe, from the pot of money standpoint, I believe Joe is ready to go as well, in terms of at least going to that next step in terms of that. And I know Mariah's going to present. I know both of her projects technically are ready. So we're at that point.
that really helps. Thank you.
Grant, did you want to add something?
If I could, I think we're missing the macro portion of this.
Yep.
The first decision that has to be made is whether and to what extent we're going to take the standard allowance for revenue loss, which is an election the county board has to make. And as they indicated, there's some school of thought that has to be made and reported within the first quarter of this year. So I would be reluctant for resolutions to come forward, because I think the argument we're going to make is that until that election is made, depending on how they're going to be funded. So I think each one of these has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And I think the other thing that can't be lost is the amount of time and staff time and it's going to take to put these things into a bundle that's ready to be brought forward as a resolution. So there's an irresistible impulse to want to do everything as quickly as we can, but you are going to have to set priorities. Something's going to be first, something's going to be last, and we have until the end of 2024. We don't want to do anything half-baked. We want to make sure we're doing the research, making sure the financial end of it, the legal end of it, the pragmatic end of it is situated. And I don't know enough about, maybe there are some of these projects that are ready to be brought forward in the next month or two. I think the reality is some of these may not come forward for a year or two. And that's just me. You could bring everything forward next month if you like, but it's just kind of the realist in me is to, we've got basically 28 days in February to make this stuff happen. And I don't think from a practical matter that we're going to be able to get much more done than the macro deciding how much of our allocation to designate as a standard allowance for revenue loss. Once we do that, for instance, the projects that Aaron is talking about are quite simple because that is what her department does anyway. In fact, we would probably roll it into the budget so you don't have to have the super majority vote if you wanted to do it that way. And there are going to be other projects that are outside of what we are doing currently. They're going to take some more time to put together. I don't want to contradict my boss.
No, well, and again, I guess, again, I don't think we're contradicting, but I just think on some of this stuff, again, we have a window of time. So like the only thing I disagree is that, like, for example, with Aaron's projects, they're ready to go. If it's just, I agree with Grant. The first thing we need to do is work with finance. We'll have a resolution declaring how we're going to, in essence, use the lost revenue. That'd be your first order of business. Again, we're doing the broadband one a little bit out of order, but I don't think we're breaking any rule in that sense. But we'd have that resolution for February. But again, if there's a project that's ready, for example, the only thing I disagree with Grant a little bit on is I'm not going to wait a year to start spending money on a program because that shortens my window of contract years. So I want to get the contract started this year so they can treat it in summer this year and have 3 years of treatment versus 2 years of treatment. So it's just a matter of knowing what the project's ready to go. And if it's valuable for us to get that stuff going, I'm fine with getting the support of the supermajority to make that go forward. So I agree with Grant. It's just a matter of how we put those together and the urgency of how we want to put those together and move forward.
Okay, are we ready to move? Oh, Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So following up with that, thank you, Ken and Grant, for that clarification. I very much appreciate that. Is it, and I hope I'm not being too, off base, but if, say we did bring something forward next month or say we did bring something forward in the short term, it needed a supermajority and it failed, we still have the option to then roll it into the budget as Grant suggested, and it still could come forward, right? Is that a okay clarification, or, can you?
Go ahead, Grant.
For certain things, I think each one of these has to be examined on a case-by-case basis. And what we're talking about rolling into the budget are, I'm going to use technical terms, things like Erin's project, which her department is doing otherwise, and it's just a matter of putting more funding into those efforts. Things that are brand new, we're going to have to look at, decide how we're going to do it, how we're going to bring it forward, and it may or may not ever be rolled into the budget. As Ken said, if there's something like a one-time expenditure that we're going to make, and we want to do it just July, it's not in the budget, you bring forward a resolution, it passes by the requisite supermajority vote. If it doesn't, then we could take a look at it for the next year's budget, which would, again, as Bob points out, would be a more majority vote. I guess it's a long way around of saying we're going to have to evaluate each of these on a case-by-case basis because they are going to be different.
Okay. David Engelbert?
I guess I'll second Grant's comments here. I think that's what finance is going to have to do, is take a look at each of these and determine, how soon that money maybe need to be spent, but also look at the other costs associated with it. And when we make determinations on any of these projects, then they can be brought forward, hopefully some of them quickly, to county board for the full county board approval.
Okay, we are going to need to shift gears. We're going to lose some votes in a little bit. So we're going to move to the broadband and then come back to the land use.
Okay, so that'll be mine. I'll cover that. So I'm actually going to go back. The best place probably to start is on page 40 and 41 of the packet. And I think many of you did attend either one of the two sessions that we've done, but just to kind of go back. The county was part of a number of communities that worked with DCEDC on commissioning a study on broadband. That study was done last year. And again, we did some, I guess, municipal meetings and also a public meeting in terms of the results of that study, in terms of how that would move forward. I'm not going to go into the details of that plan, but what came out of that though is then we did, I guess we had like a working committee that figured out, okay, what do we do next to get the broadband study implemented, or at least start moving forward with that? And that's what's represented on page 40 and 41. So it is on page 40, actually, this has the key findings, but it has what we consider the main stakeholders that are all part of this vision going forward with addressing broadband. But then it actually has what, some of the primary roles of each one of those stakeholders on the bottom of that page and what they would do in terms of how they move this project forward. I think the key thing that came out of it, why we're talking about the ARA funds, is really then on page 41 in terms of what they consider the next steps in terms of a critical timeline to move this forward. And you can see what each one of the stakeholders needs to work on, but I'm going to focus in obviously on our county aspect. One is just to review. We don't really need to accept the study, but to review the study. The big thing that came out though is approve the hiring of a project coordinator and to try to move that forward. And a part of that, as we had defined it, is to allocate the funding from the R dollars to fund that project coordinator. As part of that, we'll also be creating a FiberNet implementation committee. I guess I'd consider it similar to CATS in structure, but we'll work out the details as we move forward. But again, the main purpose for the coordinator is, if you envision this, the county is not really interested in owning, obviously, this asset per se, but there's so much that needs to be done to coordinate this project to bring it all together. So the local municipalities will be, in essence, part of the lead in determining their best path forward. But it takes that coordinator position, one, to work with that community to help get that process going and started and facilitate those processes working for the grants. But then it's also working with the neighboring community and starting to build that entire network together. If you're familiar with the study itself, obviously you can't have little islands and networks out there. Eventually they got to come together and be all coordinated into what would be working as a true network in terms of a broadband support. So in essence, that's what the coordinator position is for. We're working with the communities and obviously the ISPs and all the other players, whether they're the schools, the utility companies. Obviously, we have a lot of bedrock. So a lot of this is going to have to go on poles in terms of deploying a fiber network. So again, there's just a lot of work, and each stakeholder has their own, I guess, piece that they're responsible for to make this successful. So it's not like the county is trying to take over the entire project or do all this. There's plenty of work to go around. As it says at the bottom, one of the committee members from Bailey said, "Many hands make light work." And that's what really the theme is. There's a lot of work. All these stakeholders have to have at least part of their participation in and being working towards this project. But really what the county can do to truly address this issue is really bring on that coordinator to start moving us forward. So with that, if you go back then to the budget, that's what we put together, similar to what you've seen in the other proposals. You're looking at the funds related to it. The one thing that's obviously in my mind is the question mark is, that 2024, is there a larger allocation of dollars towards whatever infrastructure? We don't know that yet. So really what we're talking about in terms of the project itself, we're looking at 3 years of funding. Again, I just allocated it just to make it $1 million in terms of our total allocation. But again, that number, as you can see, that 500,000 is out in 2024. So that's just kind of a placeholder more than anything. But the one thing that does stand out in my mind, if you were part of those presentations and the study itself, obviously we're talking about the deployment of fiber. This is probably closer to they had said 6 to 8. I would say probably 6 to 10 years in terms of this potentially being done, depending on how fast we can work with either grants or ISPs to make this happen. So in my mind, there is definitely some potential that this could extend beyond 2024. Now, whether or not we can extend that under that obligation expense model of that, to 2026, that'd be a huge difference in terms of this allocation for this project. But again, at that point in time, the county board will be faced with the decision is, where are we with the broadband? How far did we get? And do we still want to fund this position, or are there other grants available? So this is one of those, I know, but David had brought up the long-term costs. This is one of those that, yes, we're we have talked about stepping up into broadband and addressing this issue. We're taking that step forward, and it won't be done by 2024. So we'll have a decision point at that point in time that we'll be faced with in terms of, do we continue to fund that, or is there other opportunities for funding, or was the funding extended to 2026? So I'm just being very transparent with that aspect of it. As Grant had mentioned, I guess the one thing that, just to kind of take us into the resolution part for this, is again, we're not looking to allocate, and then for all these projects, as Grant had mentioned, for all these projects, we'll be able to go through the natural budget process for future years. So it doesn't, we're not gonna have to do like an emergency or a super majority resolution for some of these projects for the future years. It'll just be, we're gonna say we're gonna allocate those funds, we're planning to use those funds, but let's build into the budget process. So in this case, what we're looking for is just that initial allocation to really get things started, and that's at $152,500 for that. So that's what we're looking to actually authorize this year. Nothing else at this point in time. In terms of the resolution itself, it's just the first year commitment to get the coordinator and get the office running. And again, the future years will be built in naturally into the budget itself.
Questions, Vinny? Oops, I'm sorry, Beth first.
Yes, I just wanted to lend my support to this and think of it from the perspective of the towns. And there is some urgency. I think the towns are waiting for direction after the viewing the broadband study. So many are left wondering, how do we even tackle this? We can't, we aren't islands, as you say. We need to work as a whole, and we need direction as a whole. And the idea of this coordinator being available to the towns and to come to town meetings would be very helpful. And I think something we need to do quickly, because they're trying to figure out what to do with their ARPA funds and get a plan. So I would think this is something that would benefit so many, and I think it would pay for itself. And I think we need to do this as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing before you go?
Yeah.
Just want to add one thing in terms of why, also the sense a little bit in my mind, the urgency on this one to bring it forward. The initial PSC grants are due in March. So in many of these, we're not gonna have the coordinator on board. I believe we have 2 communities that are ready to apply for the grant in March, but there's a significant grant opportunity. Some of the federal dollars are being released in October. So the way the federal money is being released, whether it's through the Rural Development Authority or through federal communications or even through schools, a lot of that we're expecting will hit late this year or into 2023 in that time frame. So a lot of these communities need to get a lot of work done over the next 12 months. And we need to get that started. As you can imagine, some of these are surveys, some of them are engineering studies. So again, there is some urgency for us to, I guess, get ourselves placed in the right spot to be able to apply for some of these grants, because they are going to get very competitive in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. So that's why in my mind, there is some urgency where even 30 days makes a difference for us in terms of being able to get this position posted and eventually filled. So.
Okay, Vinny?
Thank you. Did the steering committee look at, and I don't know enough about the broadband coordinator career field, but are there firms in the state that provide this service under contract? Because the questions that I have is that the salary level is at what we have in the county as a department head level, which is usually overseeing staff and has these other responsibilities. So I'm trying to understand a going rate for a broadband coordinator, and then who would be qualified to supervise the coordinator, not with human resource type of things, but are they meeting the needs of the job? I'm just trying to see which oversight committee or department knows enough about broadband to fill that role to kind of supervise that position. So 2-part question. Are there firms that could be contracted and the cost comparison with those available? And then how would it be structured or supervised as a county staff? Thank you.
I can answer both those. We are looking at the potential for doing a contracted position if we could find the right firm that could provide that service. So that's first part of the answer. What we're finding out though is that we know that there's individuals that can do this type of work, and it's technical, but it's also more facilitating, being able to work with communities and being a true project manager. So it's a little bit of a hybrid of what we're kind of going into. Because once you start working with the ISPs are actually going to have the engineering services in the warehouse of how they want to kind of deploy the network. So it's kind of a hybrid position in that sense. The other part of the question, Vinny?
Was about the pay level being at kind of what the county has for department heads or higher. It's one of the highest pay levels as a new position we'd have. So I don't know I don't have enough background to know, is that typically what a broadband coordinator makes, or what's our rationale with the salary? Thank
Yeah,
you.
so for the salary, we actually had Kelly go out and score it. So I know she worked with our contractor on that one that looks at our positions. We also did find some other positions, like for example, Brown County has one. Their salary is actually much, much higher, but they're also doing their network different in terms of their responsibility and qualifications, in terms of their network qualifications and engineering background. So that's where the salary came forward. In terms of the other part of your question was supervision. So the position would just report to myself, this organizational chart wise, but that's where we're also going to have that committee set up, because we're going to try to get a committee set up of what I would consider either experts or key stakeholders as part of this process. Because just like and I, again, imagine like CATS. CATS is very good at understanding the technical steps to move things forward. So we're looking for that same type of committee. We'd have obviously a county board rep chair that, but we're looking for that same type of expertise to help us make sure that we're moving forward and addressing the needs of the communities and the towns and ISPs and so forth. So in my mind, it's kind of almost like a dual reporting, because they'd have that technical committee, but then they'd still, in essence, fall underneath the administrative committee.
Mr. Fisher.
Madam Chairperson, just to qualify, so I understand what we're doing here. We're not talking about the $1 million or whatever the number is. We're talking about the hiring a broadband coordinator to get this ball rolling. All right, to the tune of how much? You said 150, but I only see the one page here. It says 111,000. Is that a yearly salary?
So what I worked with Steve on is we're looking at just a startup cost for an office. So the salary itself with the benefits, I'm sorry, the salary itself with the benefits is about 112. Then you're looking at cell phone. We have office equipment here, so we're not going to buy that type of thing. But this all the stuff for operating the department itself. Some training dollars. There's going to be some stuff that they do, whether they do a seminar, that type of thing. So we had estimated when we put together the budget about $152,000.
Okay. See that. And this is going to be considered, like we did earlier, a temporary position, 2-year position, or a 1-year position, or what is the thought here?
3.
It'd be a 3-year position. We'd just do it as a regular employee.
But limited term to the 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be transparent in that aspect that we're committing the funds for that period of time. And at that point in time, we have to determine how to move forward.
So that person would
they
understand that's not a.
Correct, but we bring them on as I guess what we consider a full-time equivalent employee with benefits is what we're saying.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it for me.
Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I also I guess it's a little bit of a flag to me, and this is just kind of big picture question. I mean, when we talked about a childcare coordinator for 3 years, unless it didn't include benefits, I mean, we're looking at $60,000 a year, and now we're talking about a broadband coordinator for $112,000 a year, more than double that amount. I mean, broadband's important, and I'm not bringing this up to belittle or to diminish the importance of a broadband coordinator, but I just find it kind of ironic, unless I'm missing something, that here we were proposing a child care coordinator, and child care is incredibly important for our families and for our economy. Broadband is important for our families and our economy, and then a child care coordinator is going to make less than half of what a broadband coordinator would make. I just find that incredibly ironic, and I feel like there needs to be some, I don't know, someone's got to come up or someone's got to come down, but I just don't, I think that's not an equitable pay situation. Thank you.
Did you want to add?
Bob, I don't have any specific comment to that. It's kind of the way we're doing it. Again, if it's with this one, we're actually would contract that out with the United Way. And that's one of the benefits of having that type of a partnership and being able to bring that on that position that way. The other part is that it is the market in terms of the position and qualifications and what that responsibility is. Like, I mean, it scores out that way. And it just happens to be because of the qualifications and everything related to that position and where it comes in. I understand what you're saying, though.
Other questions? Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. One more thing I was thinking before and I just forgot it. We've been dealing with this for years and years, really. And I know some work has been done putting in the fiber, and I brought that up at the admin meeting. But one thing that held us up was the thought that we could put this infrastructure in or work on that, coordinate it all, and spend lots of money at it. And before we even have it implemented, the next greatest thing comes in and none of the fiber optics are even needed. What assurances do we have here that this isn't going to happen to us and in a way trap us?
Again, I'll defer to the study because I'm not an expert in that realm. But just in terms of the presentation itself, that fiber is your strongest investment.
We got that.
As far as the long-term
right
ability. Now, I know there's different technologies they're working on in terms like, for example, they brought up Starlink. Obviously, there's the 5G technology that's also has potential. But again, if you're looking at where the requirements are for broadband, both upload and download speed, you're not going to be able to accomplish that in most of these areas without fiber. And fiber, this the listed life is 40 years, but as he mentioned on the seminar, it's much longer than that.
Okay, Biz?
Thank you. I'm looking on page 39, which kind of outlays, all of the costs. And my question is, the coordinator, the first year is 112. The second year, then they would get raised to 114.5, and the third year 117. I understand that the coordinator has got qualifications and credentials, for this to be a coordinator of a broadband project. I don't understand. Startup is 10,000, and then training all 3 years. There's going to be 3,000 for training. Is that for the coordinator just to be brought up to date with what's going on? And then the last part of the question is at the very bottom, the grant or network of that 500,000. So this is all totaling up to the $1 million you're talking about. But I guess a little clarification on the startup and the training, and then that 500,000.
Sure. Again, the startup is just to start up the office, cost related to it. So your cell phone's going to be about $2,000 a year for your cell phone service, supplies, materials, and so forth. The training is not so much, I got to go get training in a course and stuff like that. It's going to be working with the towns. Do we do some type of training in terms of grants, providing someone to come in with that, or other types of opportunities in terms of coordinating? I'm just trying to put together at least a budget so the individual has something to operate and still be able to coordinate with the towns or the ISPs or other initiatives that has to be done. There might be, maybe not even training, it might be something that's related to a study in terms of having to study the corridor in terms of making sure that the power lines can hold the fiber, that type of thing. So again, it's just kind of building a budget to get us started. The only thing that obviously the larger number is that going to be that 100,000 and that 500,000. And again, if you look at some of these grants going in, when these towns are putting them in, we're talking about grants. For example, I think Bailey's, their estimated cost is around $5.5 million. So if we're going to participate with that project, our contribution of $5,000 is not going to help them get that grant award. So from a county's perspective, we're going to have to step up and actually provide some serious dollars in terms of a matching portion of that. So that's how much that is, I don't know. But I'm just trying to at least say that we're holding aside this pocket of money because we know we need to be a player in participation, whether it's a participant with those grants with each of the towns, or there's going to be certain areas where we got to build a middle mile to connect two towns, that type of thing. So I think it's just trying to show that we're a participant in this project overall.
I'm sorry. Go
So
ahead.
the training for all 3 years, the trainer then is the coordinator. He's going to do the training to the towns.
It could be. I'm just trying, it's an opportunity where it could be. Is there a class that he might sign up on to get more proficient on the latest fiber technology? Sure. But is there an opportunity for him to train or go to the towns and provide an opportunity or get a speaker in or an expert in to do something? That's what the thought process was.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask for Mr. Engelbert to bring forward this resolution. If we are going to have these folks vote, we need to do it soon.
Okay.
Maybe we're not ready, but I want to give that opportunity. So can you bring the resolution from finance?
Move resolution 2022-07, the broadband program coordinator position. And that did go through finance and then was sent on to administrative committee the following day. So both committees have approved this individually. I guess finance was under the impression or the feeling that we needed to move forward, as has been mentioned by supervisors and our administrator, that the towns have money also, and they're waiting to see where we move. I did ask questions about where do we go after 3 years, and it seemed that we could hopefully rely on obtaining grants in the future that would help pay this position and continue moving it forward. I asked about other agencies that might do it, and looking up under Brown County, they work with a consortium, an agency, I forget just the name, maybe I think it's One North or something similar, that works with a 18 county area, but they've hired a coordinator under that too. And so they're moving forward in that direction. And this is the first step to get us up to speed and moving, researching everything.
Okay, so there's been a motion and a second to forward this resolution. David, did you want to make a comment about that?
Yes, I do. Typically, when we're looking at hiring a new employee, we have a dollar value associated resolution. This one references a location of a dollar value. Generically left alone, that would imply that this resolution is for just the $100 and some odd thousand for the actual position, not the startup, not the training, not anything else. So follow our normal pattern. If the intent is to only fund on page 39, the 112, 114, 114, 517, then I think their amendment needs to be to indicate that, or the amendment needs to indicate which ones of those line items we are funding, because the interpretation could be just the FT coordinator designation or the full $1 million.
Grant?
I guess the way I would look at it is the fiscal impact, which is on the face of the resolution itself, is what you are actually approving, which is $152,000. But that would be a good clarification. And as I understand it, while you're making a commitment to have this in existence for 3 years, this is only funding it for the balance of 2022, and the position will be in the budget for 2023 and 2024, and therefore the county board would have an opportunity to re-examine, as it does any position when it goes through the annual budget process.
Correct.
Alexis?
Thank you. I understand and support where this is going. I just want to point out that it is, as far as use of the ARPA dollars, it's ahead of the macro scale that that Grant pointed out, Corp Counsel, of designating how we want to use the money, first of all, up to $10 million of revenue loss. It's creating a position with a structural budget deficit that we don't know how we're going to pay for in year 2 and 3 based on this resolution. Again, I'm supportive. I understand the need for this to move quickly. There's a lot of things that I support and need to move quickly. This project, just the way this is brought forward, is out of line, in my opinion, with how we've been approaching the rest of the ARPA projects. Thank you.
Vinny?
A clarification question on that as well is through the ARPA funds. I mean, this is definitely a new process for me. I mean, this first time, these final rules are not that old. They just came out fairly recently. So is our intent today, what was just described is that for the 2022, the $152,000 is on this resolution. But then in 2023 and 2024, the remainders of this $1 million would go into the budget and we'd have an opportunity then. I guess I'm just questioning, are we, so that it is a $1 million commitment, or each year we would have to revisit all of the ARPA projects based on what goes into the budget? I guess I'm trying to see like what will benefit us in the long term if we say we want to commit this $1 million and then we don't have to keep coming back in every step of the way. Because that could be problematic, I think, for the other projects that are proposed too. If each year we have to come back and are we still approving this through ARPA funds? It's a little unclear how that whole process works. Thank you.
We're losing one of our votes and we already are down some folks. So I guess if you're comfortable, and I hope I'm not out of line here, that we vote on this resolution. I don't know, Ken, what do you, Grant?
I can answer Alexa's question very simply. Is I went through the same analysis she did. Why I am comfortable with the resolution is we are approving a broadband program coordinator position for the remainder of 2022 at a estimated cost of $152,000. The allowable use of ARPA funds includes those 6 categories I discussed. Among those 6 categories are broadband infrastructure. So I am 100% confident whether or not we take it under the broadband infrastructure, or at the next meeting, if the county board decides we're going to devote the funds entirely to replace public sector revenue loss, which we're allowed to do, that this will be covered. And you'll note in the resolution itself, we've used the terms obligated through the ARPA funding. So it's kind of the idea of how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, and this is one bite of the broadband infrastructure project. The county board will get a run at everything else, either in coming months or coming years.
Okay. If we don't vote right now, we're not going to have Joel. Dale, is your comment something about whether you think we should pass this or not, or is it general to the project?
Should, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we should pass it. I'm concerned about the hiring from the standpoint of if you only have 1 year obligated, are you going to be able to get somebody that for just a year, unless they know that they have an obligation that they're going to be here?
I think I think there was a nod here. Let's vote. Okay, I'm going to call the question here in the sense that I don't see any other names up there. We have the motion, the second. This is obviously a voter board thing, but we need 2/3, which means if we don't have 15 votes, this doesn't pass. Yep.
14, 15,
14. I thought, oh,
I said
4, okay. 14. But I wanted to vote while we still had 14 bodies in the room. Oh, of the. Oh, okay, right, of the bodies in the room. Okay. All right. Dale, did you want to add anything more to that?
So it did pass.
It did pass.
It says
fail.
It says fail, but it's passed. This is the computer's wrong in that part. 6, it was 16
Okay.
yes, 1 no, and 4 absent.
It was whether it was of the 2/3 of them.
I don't think it's reading right, the program.
All right. It's my eyes, not anything
No.
else.
Try that.
Yes.
Sure, so it had a red box in it, but we did have a super majority. We had 16 yes, 1 no, and 4 absent, so the motion did carry.
So.
And can I answer one
Yes,
question?
please.
So in terms of moving forward, I understand the uncertainty, and I think that's what we're trying to do, and we'll work through finance and what's the best way to do that. So in my mind, you wouldn't per se, because it's going to go through the budget process. So there's always a chance that the county board can make an adjustment depending on what happens. But in essence, we could have and I'm just brainstorming here, whether a resolution or something that says the intent of the county board is to allocate these funds in these buckets. And that within these buckets, we will review the allocation of those funds through the budget process each year. But for our mindset and moving forward, we're looking at allocating these funds in these buckets. We can work out the details in that and finance can handle that. But in my mind, that'd be the best way because yeah, we don't want to have a discussion every single year of that part. So we really need to assign that. So each one of these projects know they can commit and move forward and do that. So that'll be the intention of how I work that out with finance and we'll brainstorm with Grant in terms of the best way to bring that forward.
Yeah, I guess we don't want to make too fine a point of it because every position within the county is subject to review every budget.
Yep.
So that's just the reality of it, but
Okay.
we can work something out.
I'm going to apologize in advance. We will come back and we will talk about this, but your vice chair needs to take a break right now. So a short break, I'm sorry, it has to happen.